Confession author, Ying Cheng. Copywriting in college. Zhou Jing's and Su Sui were different from each other, and they would never meet. A casual wandering, the stars holding the moon, a well-behaved and quiet, easy to be ignored. When she finished writing one test paper after another in the library, she had no intention of glimpsing the ambiguity between him and others, and she had also witnessed him changing girlfriends one after another. At a party, Su Sui was drunk and plucked up the courage to confess in a booze. Zhou Jing's was stunned for a moment, then raised the corners of his lips and said casually, "I'm sorry, you are so good." Reunion again, he is still the proud son of heaven. He has met many times intentionally or unintentionally. Su Sui hides his thoughts that he shouldn't have, and keeps a distance from him. But he kept pressing, leaving Su Sui nowhere to hide. Finally, Su Sui was pressed against the wall and muttered, "Why me?" Zhou Jing's lowered his head to stick to his ears scorched, and his bones were broken. "There is no reason, I used to be blind. Knowing that there is space, I still put love for Tian Tian into the envelope." Hello. Levi's reply. The handsome pilot XA good girl note, flight technology, air rescue, and aviation medical knowledge all come from the internet and related data inquiries. Row, the heroine has a crush on the hero for a long time, and the hero has a lot of love history. If you can't accept it, just turn it off. Don't make yourself angry. Thank you. Source of inspiration March 23, 2020, copy on June 11. Content label, the elite of the industry. Search keywords, protagonist, Zhou Jing's, Su Sui. Supporting roles, Sheng Nanzhou, Hu Kyungzi, Lu Wenbei, Shi Yuejia. Sentence introduction, with time, dreams come true. Conception, crush on the dream of freedom. Brief comment on works. The well-behaved and quiet Su Suzong had a crush on Zhou Jing's when he was in high school. In order for him to be admitted to the university next door, the two got together by chance, but separated because of a misunderstanding. When they met again, the two had completely different lives. In the temptation to get along, Zhou Jing's discovered the secret of a girl's crush on youth. In the end, the two broke through the difficulties and came together, and the male protagonist also regained his dream. This is a confession about secret love, freedom, and dreams. The writing is fluent, and the details of secret love are real and worth seeing. At 6 o'clock in the morning, the sparrow flapping wings on the telephone pole broke the tranquility of the alley. Since it had just rained the night before, the sweet-scented osmanthus was beaten to pieces, like an overturned honey jar, dripping on the wet ground. Moisture came in through the gap in the window. Su Sui lay down on the table, her shoulders shrinking subconsciously. She raised her head with difficulty, stretched out her hand and rubbed her face to make herself more awake. Yesterday Su Sui had just finished 2 operations, plus a night shift to stay until now. The long black eyelashes cannot hide the tiredness of the eyelids. In the bathroom, Su Sui had a mint-flavored mouthwash in his mouth, turned on the faucet and took a handful of water and simply washed his face. At 7:50, the number of people in the department gradually increased, and everyone said good morning to each other. Su Sui quickly finished a croissant with a pinch. The black coffee was placed next to him. Someone took it away and replaced it with a bottle of milk. Su Sui raised his head. It was a new intern. The boy scratched embarrassedly, "Dr. Su, always drinking coffee is bad for your health." "Thank you." Su Sui smiled. She glanced at the time. "Go, it's time for the rounds." Most of the patients in the inpatient department like this Dr. Su to come to rounds. He is gentle, patient, and listens to their occasional complaints. Several interns followed Su Sui. She rounded the ward one after another. Yaya raised a corner and looked down her eyes. She had a blue certificate pinned on her left chest. Purin Hospital Surgeon Su Sui. When a girl was found during the ward round, the patient had just had his appendix cut off in 2 days, and Su Sui specifically asked her to stop eating, rest and rest. The little girl was young, and soon after the operation, she regained her vitality. She raised a pair of big eyes and said that she would die if she ate this kind of food that had faded out of the bird. Dr. Su, can I drink milk tea? The little girl asked cautiously. Su Sui stopped on the blue folder with his signature pen, raised his eyes to a pair of expectant eyes, and let go, a little bit. Why, but I prefer to drink Yaitang. The little girl looked distressed. The trainee behind him couldn't help laughing. Su Sui spoke blankly, with a cruel voice, now you can't drink a little bit. The little girl reacted with hindsight and regretted, I was wrong, doctor. After checking the room, Su Sui put his hands in his pocket and went back to the office, and ran into the teacher who had been carrying him in the corridor, who was also the director of surgery. Xiao Su, just finished checking the room. The other party asked her. Yeah, Su Sui nodded, looking at the director as if he had something to say. He took the initiative to ask, Teacher, what do you want? You are really busy lately. You are the hardest worker in this department. You have the same energy that I used to be. Dr. Zhang smiled, with a kind face, but also pay attention to the combination of work and rest. Your mother called me. Want me to worry about your big business? Su Sui was stunned. He didn't expect that the consequence of her repeated rejections of blind dates was that her mother found the director to suppress her. She settled her mind, Teacher, do you know what my mother's dream is after middle age? What? Being a matchmaker, first practice with me. Su Sui pointed to his innocent self. You boy, Director Zhang laughed, his tone of helplessness, and then turned around, there is a nice guy in the family yard where I live, and the conditions are good. Su Sui's eyes dangled around him, and he turned off the subject, Teacher, why did I smell smoke on your body? It's heavy. Everyone in general medicine knows that Dr. Zhang is exquisite in medical skills and outside his authority, but he is also notoriously afraid of his wife. Dr. Zhang's wife is the head nurse of the pediatrics department and often comes to check the post. Every time the teacher smelled the smell of smoke on his body, she threatened to smash his hands if it weren't for the care that his hands could be used to save the dead. I haven't had time to smoke today. It may be caused by the patient's family. Dr. Zhang grabbed his collar and sniffed, panicking, Don't tell me, I will wash my hands first. After the teacher left, Su Sui finally got off work until 11 o'clock in the morning. She went home to make up for a sleep, and fell asleep in a dark place. When she woke up, the sky was completely dark, and the stars were already lit up in the distance. Su Sufang was empty for a while, got up and closed the window, and played a very annoying rock song using the Bluetooth of his mobile phone to connect the speaker. He stepped on the finger pressure pad to relax. Most people think that it may be painful on the acupressure pad. For Su Sui, it is a good way to decompress. The phone made a ding sound. Su Sui sweated a little on his forehead, and directly sat on the finger pressure pad to get the phone. Su's mother sent a bunch of news, which meant she was going to go on a blind date. Yun Danfenking, this time the guy is really good. He is 2 years older than you. He is still a lawyer. He is a successful person and looks good. The introducer said that he is a responsible and good guy. Yun Dan and Feng Qing, see you tomorrow? Don't make excuses, I know you won't be on duty tomorrow night. Yun Danfenking pushed you a business card, and Su Sui clicked on the other person's avatar, and vomited, this kind of phototalking posture with my hands folded on my chest, I don't look like a successful student, it's like a salesman. When Su's mother saw Su Sui's interruption, she knew that she wanted to get through as usual. This attitude was problematic. Su's mother was a little angry, and was too lazy to type this time, and a series of death voices came over. Yun Danfenking, you are 27 this year, and you are almost becoming an old girl, why are you still not in a hurry? Su Sui replied, Mom, I don't really want to get married now. At least her thinking at this stage is like this. She is relaxed and at ease, and Su Sui is busy at work, so she really doesn't have the energy to think about it. Light clouds and light wind, then what do you want to do? Before Su Sui could reply, Yun Danfenking sent another message, then do you want to be a nun? Su Sui Shixiao was about to reply when a certain message prompt popped up on the phone screen. She clicked in. After many years, someone still liked her answer, and there was a reply. The question is, what was the funniest thing you did during the secret love period as a student? On a whim, Su Sui replied anonymously, when I was in the second year of high school, a foreign film was released. I liked it so much that I bought a blue t-shirt around the film. On the first day when I wore it to class, I suddenly found that he was also wearing a blue t-shirt. Although he was wearing an ordinary but blue t-shirt, my heartbeat was very obvious, and I secretly thought it was a couple style. Maybe God sees my secret crush too hard, so he sent me a sweet coincidence. Since then, I often wear this dress. Even the night before, I wondered if he would wear a blue t-shirt the next day. He sits in the penultimate row, and I sit in the second row upright. In the morning class every day, in order to get a better look at him, I would deliberately go in through the back door and pretend to walk by him casually. Occasionally, Yu Guang caught a glimpse of him lying lazily in his arms, with messy hair and bulging thin shoulder blades. When it is a blue shadow, the heartbeat will speed up abnormally, and I will be happy all day long. As a result, I later discovered that this piece of clothing was a 9.9 yuan t-shirt that his girlfriend bought at the supermarket and picked up the bill. Such a stubborn boy doesn't even mind wearing it every day. I immediately became sober and seemed to understand one thing: he might never see me. Su Sui's number of likes for this reply was ranked first, and many people even responded under her, "It's not funny at all. Why do I feel so sad? Hug Miss Sister." Su Suran was stunned. When he looked at his answer many years ago and was about to hide it, a new reply popped out, "Do you still like him now?" The astringency in the eyes deepened a little bit. Su Sui sat on the acupressure pad, and for some reason, there was dense pain in her limbs all over her body, and she couldn't breathe through. Su Sui did not reply, quit the software, and replied to his mother, "Okay." The next night, Su Sui dressed up specially, and she appeared in the restaurant at the address given by her mother. The other party was already waiting there. The other party's name is Lin Wenchen, who works in a law firm, and his impression of Su Sui is much better than the picture. The two talked fairly well. After the meal, Lin Wenchen suggested that he should take a walk nearby. Su Cai thought about it and went out for a blind date. There was no need to squeeze, and finally nodded. At 10 o'clock in the evening, the moonlight was bright white. Su Sui and Lin Wenchen walked side by side, and they spoke a few words from time to time, and the atmosphere was fairly comfortable. On the snack street, blue and red curtains are staggered in a row. Eggplants are placed on the grill with tin foil. The boss sprinkles a handful of cumin, and it makes a sizzling sound under the oil fire. The color of the charcoal grilled sari is gradually changing. Yellow, fresh, and tender aroma overflowing. The light bulb hangs above the head, and the fine dust floats on it, and the light is dim. Cheng Yu took a plate of skewers and sat down in front of the man. The two drank a little wine and started chatting one after another. Cheng Yu handed him a bunch of beef. His tone was a little cautious. "Boss, don't be too stressed, this time, you should take a break." Zhou Jing's was biting the string, raised his eyelids and glanced at him when he heard the words, then laughed, "What pressure can I have? It's fine if you don't have it." Cheng Yu breathed a sigh of relief. Zhou Jing sat opposite Jinju, with his feet stepping on the horizontal bar at the bottom of the table. He had not sat down here for a while, and had already attracted the attention of several girls at the table next to him. However, he was too lazy to lift his eyelids, with a cigarette between his fingertips, and the smoke rose slowly, making him handsome and cold. Cheng Yu was with him, already feeling the attention from all directions, and he was too proud. In addition, he liked to talk and talk when he drank, and a lot of coercion. "Hey, boss, let alone, the past few years as a pilot I'm always flying around the world in the sky. I really haven't looked at it carefully. The place where there are many beautiful women is our Beijing city. Hey, look at those long legs. Cheng Yu sighed. Zhou Jing's didn't look at his head, and sneered, look blindly and tell you ma zi. Cheng Yu angrily retracted his gaze, his eyes brightened halfway, and he pushed his arm, boss, there is a water spirit on the opposite side, and he looks like a southerner. Hearing the word south, Zhou Jing subconsciously raised his head, swept across a pair of dark eyes, and then froze for a moment. The other party is indeed a typical southerner, with white skin, full apricot eyes, wearing an apricot knitted dress, 2 thin straps, and white shoulders exposed. Hey, I have a boyfriend, but the atmosphere of the two is just to meet each other, and they are probably on a blind date, but the two of them have a gentle temperament, and they match very well. Chenjue commented. Cheng Yu felt that the air around him suddenly cooled when he spoke. He was a little flustered, and at a glance he saw his brother snapped off a bamboo stick with his bare hands, without saying a word. Su Sui didn't notice the movement here, and was walking side by side with Lin Wenchen through this snack street. When it was about to end, there were a few struggles from the alley. It turned out that an old lady selling sugar water was entangled by a few drunk bastards, and was about to smash her stall on the grounds of unpalatable food. Su Sola had no intention of meddling, but the old man's pleading voice instantly resembled her grandmother. Su Sui's hung was about to walk over, and Lin Wenchen pulled her back, with a shrewd tone, "Don't go there at this time. It will be miserable if you get corrupted by a gangster or an old lady. I like to be wronged." Su Sui curled his lips, then looked at Lin Wenchen and pulled his hand. The other party let go in embarrassment. The old man was pushed to the ground by a gangster headed. Su Sui walked over to support her, his voice calm, "How much money? I will pay." The gangster with dyed red hair saw Su Sui's eyes light up, and put one of his hands on her bare shoulder skin. "Since it's my sister begging for mercy, forget about it, and have a drink with my brother. Don't mess around, I'm a lawyer, you let go." Lin Wen pushed his eyes deeply, too nervous to say a word. Seeing that Lin Wenchen was a soft bubble, several gangsters waved the iron rod in his hand and asked, "Why, want to fight?" Lin Wenchen took a step back and glanced at Su Sui before gritted his teeth and ran away. Hunk's hand rested on Su Sui's shoulder, and he rubbed it presumptuously. In less than a second, Su Sui twisted his wrist with his backhand and made a click sound. "Grass, you fucking!" The red hair let go of his hand painfully, his face sank completely, and he raised the palm of one hand, and when he was about to slap it down, suddenly a slender one appeared out of thin air, with distinct joints. Xiao Sheng intercepted the fist of the bully. "It is Zhou Jing's. I thought it was a woman's hand, and it was soft and boring." Zhou Jing's tone was frivolous, muddled. His words were tantamount to provocation. The other party freed up a hand and waved over. Zhou Jing's flashed sideways, grabbed Hong Mao's arm and punched the person to the ground. The red hair let out a painful scream. A few people gathered around and fought all at once. Su Sui squatted down, helped the old man, helped her pack her things, and sent her away without saying a word. A melee came quickly and went quickly. Zhou Jing's fled in a onion 4. Zhou Jing stood under the street lamp, a long shadow drawn in front of her. Su Sui raised his eyes and looked at him carefully. Zhou Jing's wears a flight jacket with 4 bars on his shoulders. His head and neck are straight and oppressive. He has single eyelids, very short hair, sharp lines on his side, and a bright red blood stain on his chin. A pair of dark and sharp eyes staring at him. She. When Zhou Jing saw Su Sui's heart shrank, he took a step back subconsciously. At this moment, a cool breeze blows, and the leaves and garbage bags on the roadside are rolled into the air and are crumbling. Seeing her familiar appearance, Zhou Jing pressed his tongue against his left cheek and sneered. The man turned his head to spit a saliva into the trash can, and then knocked out a cigarette from the cigarette case. His slender fingertips twisted the of the cigarette, lowered his head and bit the cigarette, and the silver lighter issued a click the sound of. It's still a careless look. He was waiting for permission to speak. Su Sui looked away, his tone was unexpectedly alienated. Thank you tonight, I'm leaving now. After that, Su Sui was taken aback. She had imagined a scene where the two met countless times, but when it really happened, they didn't even have to say anything. Su Sui turned around and wanted to leave. Zhou Jing's took a step closer. The tobacco smell on his body was obvious, and his biting breath made people unable to move. From the ground, his shadow suddenly encircled her. His eyelashes drooped, and under the projection of the light, a faint haze appeared, and his tone was somewhat gritted. Are you on a blind date? Su Sui thought that the meeting last night was nothing more than a hurried wipe, but he did not expect to see Zhou Jing's in the hospital the next day. Just after Su Sui came out of the operating room, the transparent hand sanitizer was squeezed in his palm before it was squeezed out. The head nurse rushed over, with an anxious tone. There was a patient in the outpatient department who put a light bulb in his mouth. He was too anxious. Dr. Song couldn't get it. Come out, calling you over. Okay, I'll go over right away. Su Sui reached into the faucet and took a brief wash, heading directly to the outpatient department. The door of the office was pushed open. Su Sui came in and saw Zhou Jing's at a glance, as well as several nurses and doctors who were all around the patient with a helpless expression. The patient was a girl, and he was so anxious at the moment. Tears rolled around and made intermittent noises. The man accompanied by the side also ridiculed the little girl, with a cold, familiar voice that rang in his ears. Xiaoming, 3.5 years old downstairs, also plays this project. You two can make a debut together. The little girl couldn't make a sound, so she glanced at him angrily. The two of them faintly fell in Su Sui's eyes, and she lowered her eyes to hide the emotions in her eyes. Su Sui walked over, took the protective gloves handed over by the nurse, walked to the patient, pinched her chin and looked carefully. She found the light bulb stuck in her mouth impartially, just the right size. Zhou Jing's also spotted her at this time. Su Sui deliberately ignored the sight of her and asked an intern behind him, "Did you use paraffin oil?" "It's used, it's no use," the doctor replied. Su Sui lowered his head, as if the hair loop tied behind his head was a little loose, and a strand of broken hair on his forehead was hanging down on his cheeks. She observed the light bulb in the patient's mouth again, and said, "Go and get a surgical bag." 5 minutes later, with a crowd of people watching, Su Sui whispered to the patient to relax, and slowly passed the surgical bag in with the root canal. When the surgical bag covered the bulb, Su Sui said, "You bite down hard." The girl kept shaking her head with horror in her eyes. What if she bit down and exploded? Su Sui comforted her, "Nothing will happen." It was useless for Su Sui to comfort her for a while. The girl couldn't speak, tears still existed in her eyes, and her nerves were very tight. Su Sui looked at the earrings she was wearing, the silver leaf earrings, and said unintentionally, "The earrings are pretty." The girl was grinning, and she was immediately taken away from her attention. She took out her mobile phone and opened the software, and she spoke with a whimper in her mouth, intermittently but can piece together what she was talking about. "I'll find the link for you." When the girl concentrated on finding a link for Su Suk, Su Sush took advantage of her relaxation, put her hand on her chin, and slammed it down relentlessly, making a click sound, and the glass shattered. The girl stayed for 2 seconds, and reacted with a scream of "Ah!" Zhou Jing's patted her head and let out a slight chuckle, "Okay, I'll take you to eat ice cream later." The girl calmed down immediately and stopped making noise. He seldom coaxes people. As long as he says something nice, the woman will take the initiative to surrender. The rest was handed over to the outpatient doctor. Su Sui took off his protective gloves and still went into the trash bag, put his hands in the pockets of the white coat, and left the outpatient department. The girl looked at Dr. Su's cold back and was in shock. the soft girl is unbelievable. I seriously found a link for her, but she gave me a gentle knife. Su Sui went back to the office and was busy for half an hour. When she passed the front desk of the nursing department, a young nurse called her, "Hey, Dr. Su, someone was looking for you just now. The family members of the bulb, promise, what I left for you, said it is a thank you gift." Su Sui looked over. It was a row of lychee and white peach flavored milk and a blue hair ring. Her eyes were startled and she didn't move away for a while. Several young nurses joked together, "Dr. Su, who really looks good." He just picked up the corner of his mouth and smiled at Xiao Zhang. Xiao Zhang's soul is gone. Zhou Jing's does have this ability. A prodigal son, he basically doesn't need to do anything. He hooks a finger, and sometimes even only needs a look, and there are countless women coming after him. Su Sui nodded and turned around to leave. The nurse called her, and said, "Dr. Su, you haven't got your things yet. You can divide it up." Su Sui's expression was calm. Su Sui turned and walked forward, but saw Zhou Jing's and the girl next to her at the corner not far away. The girl was stylishly dressed, with bright looks, big red lips, and a curvy figure. When she was in the ward just now, Su Sui had a taste of the girl's ability to act like a baby. She raised her eyes and looked over. The girl shook Zhou Jing's arm and didn't know what she was talking about. She was obviously acting like a baby. There was no expression on Zhou Jing's face, but his eyebrows were relaxed. Su Sui's hands in her pockets clenched unconsciously, her fingertips turned white, and she woke up with pain. Isn't he always like this? She likes the coquettish and daring, but she is too obedient and well-behaved. Good students are never in his choice. Just face to face with each other, Su Sui can only walk over. They obviously saw Su Sui, and the girl called her with a bright smile, "Dr. Su, thank you just now." Su Sui shook his head, "You are polite, this is what we should do." The girl was standing next to Zhou Jing's, and she glanced at the man. It was obvious that after seeing this Dr. Su, her brother's mood was not right. There must be something tricky about the two of them. The girl rolled her eyes and said, "Dr. Su, do you and my cousin know each other? It feels like the relationship is not normal." It turned out to be a cousin. But Envy's question was too bold and direct, and Su Sui couldn't help it. She raised her eyes to Zhou Jing's, hoping that he could do something. Zhou Jing's put his hand in his pocket, seeing Su Sui at a loss, his cheeks flushed, and he teased his thoughts. He looked straight at Su Sui, with the tip of his tongue pressed against his chin and gave a low laugh, with a meaningful tone, "Tell me, what is our relationship, et?" It seemed that the ambiguity or Fenjiu related, he left it to her to decide. Because of his lazy and teasing posture, Su Sui understood that a man of heaven like him probably never understood what it was like to really like someone. Perhaps, he never took her in his heart. Zhou Jing's originally wanted to make a joke, but he regretted it after saying this. Because he saw Su Sui's clear and lingling eyes, and slowly became wet. A panic-like emotion spread in my heart, expanding infinitely. Zhou Jing's cleared her throat. When she wanted to say something, she saw Su Sui blinking, her original emotions faded completely, her eyes were calm and her tone of voice was calm. "It doesn't matter if you don't know it." Zhou Jing saw the decisiveness and sternness in her eyes, and his heart was entangled with a thin thread. It was an inexplicable emotion, and he finally reacted. The person in front of him really doesn't like him anymore. When Su Sui was just in college, social software like WeChat just became popular, but in October of that year, Su Sui formally met with Zhou Jing's. At the beginning of October, the autumn tiger had not dissipated. The heat was surging and the air was sticky. People stood outside for a while, and the sweat from their elbows dripped onto the ground and quickly melted and evaporated. These medical students formally entered university life after their military training. Originally, anatomy was a course for the first half of the semester, but their professor did the opposite, letting them study this course in advance. Today was only the second time they learned anatomy, and the professor left them homework to dissect toads and record their neural responses in the form of group cooperation. The recruits get started, and there is a scene of turmoil in the laboratory. "Fuck, big sister, hold it down," a boy said with a grumpy face, "don't let it run away again." You can't work, I dare not, I am afraid when I see it." The girl's voice trembled. The two of them worked together, and the girl didn't dare to reach out to touch, but accidentally bumped into the toad. As a result, the green creature directly faced the boy, urinating him all over. The air was still, and then there was a burst of laughter. The boy on the test bench next door laughed so his shoulders were shaking, and said, "Dude, open the door." The experiment failed several times, and the students in the other group were even more exaggerated. Before their hands touched the toad, they went to the bathroom and vomited several times just seeing its appearance. On the other side, several people gathered around a girl and watched her anatomy experiment. The girl is slender, with her hair tied behind her, revealing a white neck. She is wearing a white coat and her eyes are quiet and clean under the goggles. I saw that she grabbed the toad without fear and fixed it, holding a steel needle in her hand and piercing it into the back of her head. She was not afraid, she directly pulled out the mashed thing, and then pulled off her spine with the other hand. Cut open the neck with scissors, clamp its tongue with tweezers and observe. The whole process was done in one go, the movements were clean and smooth, and there was a small amount of applause around. A boy boasted, "Admire, Su Sui, I think you are a kind of daring thing because of your looks. Who knows, it's so bold and neat when dissected." The girl next to her opened her mouth wide in surprise, "Su Sui, you are so amazing, aren't you afraid?" Su Sui's dark eyelashes drooped, forming a shallow arc, and smiled calmly, "I'm not afraid. Your operation was so beautiful just now, can you teach me?" The girl who spoke was called Liang Shuang, a classmate of Su Sui's. "Good." Su Sui nodded. Under Su Sui's guidance, Liang Shuang mastered the essentials, finally overcoming the psychological obstacles, holding a big steel needle when he was about to poke Toad's brain. As a result, the roof shook slightly, followed by a loud roar of airplanes, and the buzzing sound continued. Liang Shuang was startled. The steel needle deflected and directly hit the Toad's thigh. "Come out!" It failed again. Liang Shuang became angry and began to complain, "I really don't understand why the president who built this medical university moved the school site to an aerospace university next to a street across the street." The group of pilots tried out at the airport. Practicing, morning and night, noisy, really annoying. A girl heard Liang Shuang's complaint and joked, "Hey, Liang Shuang, I remember when you first came, didn't you still say to find a pilot to be your boyfriend? Why did you change your heart so quickly?" Hearing the words pilot, Su Sui's heart tightened, and then he returned to the test bench to observe the data casually. Liang Shuang replied, "Two different things, haven't we found them yet?" Su Sui returned to the experiment table to continue the experiment. A girl in her group called Bai Yu, except for handing tweezers, steel needles and other tools, did not make any contribution to their group work. Because Bai Yu looked at her mobile phone after a while, she didn't think about anatomy at all. Suddenly, the mobile phone she was standing by made a ding sound, and Bai Yu clicked on it, revealing a sweet smile. Su Sui's Hung leaned over to observe Toad's brain nerve response on the computer. Bai Yu called her, "Su Sui, I have something to do. You can help me with the rest." It means that she does the homework alone, but the final name must be for two people. Su Sui took a look at the experiment and it was more than half finished, and nodded without emotion. She doesn't care about such things very much, because she is lazy. Bai Yu walked away happily. Because Su Sui was alone, he naturally completed the experiment a bit later than ordinary people. When it was over, he found that Liang Shuang was still waiting for her. "You haven't left yet." Su Sui took off his disposable gloves. Of course I am waiting for you. Liang Shuang squeezed her face. Tusk, it feels pretty good. After Su Sui changed her clothes, Liang Shuang dragged her to run down the stairs, saying, hurry up, my potato ribs are gone. In a canteen, the two finally got a meal and sat down. There was a boy with glasses holding a dinner plate and asked if he could sit together. Su Sui held a soft and harmless face, but refused his request mercilessly. Liang Shuang sat opposite her and looked at Su Sui, slapped her face. Her face was white with a pink layer, apricot eyes, and two dimples when she laughed. His hair was tied behind his head in a regular manner, and the broken hair on his forehead fell out recklessly. The appearance of a typical southerner looks so good. Liang Shuang sighed with ribs and sighed, hey, there are a few this month, follow me, do you know that our department forum is conducting departmental polls, you are on the list of candidates. Su Sui didn't show much reaction to this incident. She inserted a straw into the milk carton and said with a puffed face, but I was really ordinary in high school. The kind of existence that would be submerged in the crowd. If Liang Shuang had seen the photos of her in high school, she would not have said such a thing. In high school, she was sick all the year round and drank traditional Chinese medicine for a long time. Her figure was swollen and her face was too pale. She wore a monotonous and generous school uniform all the year round. She was an ordinary girl. Fortunately, after getting healthy, she lost 20 pounds when she was in college. In addition, her white skin, small features and delicate features, seemed to be reborn all at once, and everyone paid more attention to her. It is indeed because colleges and high schools are really different. There are multiple aesthetics here, and she will be paid attention to by accepting people with different personalities. Hey, who is not in high school, it's all for studying, Liang Shuang put a piece of meat in her bowl and asked, but I think you have refused several times, what do you like? Su Sui bit the straw and didn't move. A game human face appeared in his mind. He quickly pressed it down again and shook his head, I don't know. It's okay, it's still early. Liang Shuang poked the vegetable with chopsticks, and it took a while to react. She beat spinach and said bitterly, I wipe it, I can't do it, I feel like vomiting when I see the green color. Too disgusting. I'll help you eat it, I'm not afraid. Su Sui said with a smile, and then put the spinach in his bowl. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Su Sui stood on the roof of the school's ideological and political building to blow the air. The evening breeze blew her test papers on the railing, like a white dove flapping its wings. Su Sui plugged his earphones into his mobile phone and stood on the rooftop to do his listening test papers. There are few people here, it is quiet and the scenery is good, she often comes here, it is a good place to relax. When he is tired, Su Sui presses the test paper with his elbow and relaxes his eyes as he looks into the distance. At this time, she would always look in one direction, the northeast corner of the school was pointing to the playground of Beijing North Aeronautics and Astronautics University. Every day there are students from the Flying Academy who are practicing day after day. From the rooftop, you can only see the dark heads under the green ocean. She couldn't see anything clearly, and she didn't know what she was expecting. Su Sui's hung was in a daze, the mobile phone he was holding vibrated, and it was Su's mother calling. Su Sui clicked to answer. Su's mother cared about her study and life, and then moved the topic to the weather. The frost is about to fall. Once the frost has passed, the weather will turn colder. Remember to buy an extra quilt. Su Mu nagged. Su Suishi smiled, with a brisk tone, Mom, where is this? It's still very hot here. And I haven't stayed in the north before. Su's mother sighed when she heard this. Su Sui was born in a single-parent family in the south and grew up in a small town called Ying in Jiangsu and Zhejiang provinces. Mother is an ordinary middle school Chinese teacher. When Su Sui was in high school, she was worried that the teaching resources in the small place were not good, so she planned to send her out to study. It happened that Su Sui's uncle was doing business in Beijing North City and proposed to let her come here to study. Su's mother sent her off as soon as she gritted her teeth for the child's education. Su Sujao transferred to Tianhua No. 1 middle school in the first half semester and spent 2.5 years in the north. When she applied for the college entrance examination, Su's mother had discussed with Su Sui, and she would choose any university in the south. Who knew that she had to apply for the medical university in North Beijing with all her heart? Thinking of this, Su's mother complained softly, "You are in college, you are so far away from me, and no one takes care of you. When your child gets cold hands and feet in winter, he is afraid that it will be too cold. I really don't know why you have to go there. Go." Su Sui had to change the subject, coaxed his mother a few words, and finally hung up the phone. Su Sui stood on the rooftop in a daze, and she couldn't help asking herself, why did she come here? It should be crazy. She was in a daze, and suddenly there was an emotional hum from the corner not far away, accompanied by an anger. Su Suishun looked at the sound source. There were two people standing on the wall around the corner. The girl was tall and demon-looking. She was next to him with an ambiguous posture. The boy was leaning against the wall with his clothes loosely wrapped around him. Su Sui was separated from them by an abandoned iron frame, which was covered with mottled red rust. Across a small frame, the line of sight gradually narrowed, but the movements of the two became more obvious. The boy didn't move much, but the girl pressed it tightly, touched her finger down subconsciously, and hooked the bottom of the boy's black trousers. The hint was obvious. When she wanted to take a step closer, the boy stretched out his hand to easily clamp her knuckles, making it immobile, and looked at her with a smile. The girl was so hot that she took the opportunity to confess, "I really like you." The boy didn't respond much to this, he was lazy in his bones, and he smirked, "How much do you like it?" After speaking, the boy's slender fingers wrapped around the red bow on her chest, and the clean fingertips touched an inch of her skin. To be puzzled, control meant full control, and the girl's chest gradually fluctuated and panted. Faint expectation surged from the bottom of her heart. She raised her eyes and met the boy's teasing eyes, her face flushed, and she simply buried her entire face on his broad chest, and said softly, "You are so annoying." The wind stopped, and the burning clouds in the evening were warm and bright, and Su Sui felt a bit sun-dried, hot, and stuffy, and she almost couldn't stay longer. The orange-eared fish scale clouds on the horizon moved over, and the light became clear at this moment. The boy suddenly turned his head and looked over, and their eyes collided in midair. The boy's hair is extremely short, revealing green stubble, his eyelid folds are shallow, his pupils are pitch black and careless, the curve of his jawline is smooth, and the protruding Adam's apple is slowly rolling up and down. His eyes rested on her without emotion. A violent evening breeze passed through the border and poured into her throat, too dry to say a word. Su fled with Luo Huang, and the conversation between the girl and the boy spread to her faintly along the wind, very clear. She heard Bai Yu ask softly, "What are you in a daze? Did you meet someone you know?" The boy's voice was almost metallic and cold, and 3 words rolled out of his throat, "I don't know." At 11 o'clock in the evening, Su Suishin was lying on the bed. She was looking at the school schedule for the next day, and the senior sister came to check the dormitory. There are only 2 people in the dormitory, she and Liang Shuang, and the other is Bai Yu, who has not returned for a long time. Bai Yu has divided her territory from the first day she moved in, and emphasized that she has a cleanliness habit, so that they don't put their things next to her, and don't touch her things. Liang Shuang is quite critical about this, but Bai Yu has no contradiction with them other than that. After all, he was still a classmate, Liang Shuang still helped. When the elder sister came to the ward round, Liang Shuang pretended to be surprised, "Oh, I forgot, our teacher called her out because of something, and it is estimated that she will be back soon." "Elder sister, this will work, I will let her come back to your sales office." "Leave." Okay, then you go to bed earlier, the senior sister said. After sending off the senior sister, Liang Shuang sighed, Bo Yu is too brave, right? I haven't come back for a date so late. Su Sui put down the phone, and a scene of the two being intimate in the evening appeared in her mind, and her heart was entangled like silk threads again. She couldn't breathe. She lowered her eyelashes, it should be back soon. She didn't want to continue discussing this topic. She looked at the empty bed opposite and said, I heard that a new roommate is coming tomorrow. Su Sui signed up late at the time, and they were assigned to the same dormitory. One of the beds was vacant. I heard that this classmate took a 1-month leave for some reason and will arrive tomorrow. I heard that it is from the Department of Veterinary Medicine. How great is it to save small animals? I had known that I would choose this major. When my brain was soaked in water, I would choose clinical medicine so hard. After only a month, my hair started to be bald. I'm afraid that when I graduate, I'll have to change my name to Liang San Mao. Liang Shuang said. Then, I'll give you a single reincarnation. Su Sui's tone was tentative. Yet, Kong sang Simiada. Liang Shuang rushed to her. Su Sui laughed out loud, and the boring mood just diminished a little. The two were chatting. At this moment, Bai Yuyu pushed in. Liang Shuang told her about the sale. Bai Yuyu looked good and thanked Liang Shuang. The next day, the new roommate drove to him, followed by two people with large and small luggage. The new roommate is wearing sunglasses and a brand-name dress, and the two boys behind him are about to follow. The new roommate stretched out his index finger and said in a serious tone, the girls' boudoir is where you guys can come in. The two boys froze when they heard the words, and neither returned before carrying their luggage. The new roommate took out some red banknotes from the bag and handed them to them, and said gratifyingly, just leave it at the door. Okay, Miss Hu, let's go first. There was only Su Sui in the bedroom. She happened to be reading a book. After hearing the sound, she closed the book and walked over, I will help you. After the two helped pull the luggage in, the new roommate took off his sunglasses, his sense of distance was broken, and introduced himself, Hello, I'm Hu Zixi from the veterinary medicine class, you can call me Zixi. Only then did Su Sui see her appearance clearly. The comics have bangs, big eyes and baby fat on her cheeks, and her body is a little fat, she looks hearty and cute. Clinical medicine class, Su Sui, you can call me anything. Su Sui said. It was the first time for Hu Kyungzi to leave home and live on campus. It was a little unwieldy to pack things up. When the quilt was finally covered, she got into the bed sheets, cursing, but she didn't succeed in the end. Su Sui was a little bit dumbfounded, and patted her, I'll help you. After being covered by Su Sui's hand, it suddenly became neat. After cleaning up the dormitory, Su Sui accompanied the new roommate to register for the campus card and buy daily necessities. Su Sui didn't have a word of complaint during the whole process. Hu Kyungzi fell in love with this girl who looked good but was very organized. At this point, Hu Kyungzi has become an invisible human-shaped pendant next to Su Sui. She always follows the length of the day and the short. She also reluctantly shared the photos of her idols with her. The name is called under the witness of idols, she made a good friend. Su Sui raised the corner of her mouth. She also liked Hu Zixi, cheerful and cute, and the last two of them became closer. On Friday, Su Sui and Liang Shuang had a meal. When she was in the second canteen, she was worried about Hu Zixi who had not eaten in the dormitory, so she sent a message to her what she wanted to eat, planning to help her pack a copy back. After sending the message, Su Sui put down his phone and concentrated on eating. After a while, Liang Shuang pushed her arm with some excitement and lowered her voice, Fuck, look, Bai Yuyu's boyfriend has appeared. Son, Zhou Jing's. Su Sui froze for a moment, and looked up mechanically. There was a loud voice in the cafeteria, and he saw him at a glance. Boyfriend Bai Yuyu accompanied her in line. After Bai Yuyu hit the meal, she turned around holding the silver dinner plate. The boy is on her left, with his hands in his pockets, in a casual posture. Bai Yuyu raised her head to speak to him from time to time, and her eyes were as bright as stars when she looked at him. The boy lowered his head, not knowing what she said, and twitched the corner of his mouth in response. Suddenly, someone wiped his shoulder and almost hit Bai Yuyu. The boy quickly raised his hand, took her shoulder, frowned and asked her to look at the way. Su Sui's stomach began to pan acid, and she couldn't eat anything. She lowered her eyes and chewed the rice with her head down. The food was tasteless. The two found a seat to sit down, which happened to be diagonally in front of them, and Su Sui could only see his profile. Liang Shuang was still quietly staring at the two of them. The boy was so good, and after sitting there for a while, he attracted the attention of passers-by. Liang Shuang sighed while watching. Look, the corners of Bai Yuyu's mouth are almost reaching the back of his head, but also, if I find a handsome and awesome boyfriend, I won't be happy to die. It's the first time I saw Zhou Jing's today. I heard that he changed his girlfriend very quickly. The shortest time is no more than 1 month, and the longest time is no more than 3 months. Guess how long Bai Yuyu can stay with him this time? Liang Shuang dialed the beans on the plate and asked with a look of gossip. How do you know his name is Zhou Jing's? Su Sui asked a question casually, not wanting to guess the shelf life of his girlfriend. Of course, didn't I mean to find a pilot to be a boyfriend? I got into the forum of Bihang early in the morning, and several famous coaches in their school forced me to master all the information. In addition, Bai Yuyu has a high profile. She didn't know who she was in the class. She talked about a great boyfriend. Liang Shuang knocked on the door with chopsticks, like a storyteller. Would you like to listen to my gossip? Su Sui smiled, but did not answer. Zhou Jing's, a handsome man, height 185, a freshman majoring in flight technology at Beijing North University of Aeronautics and Astronautics. Do you know where this guy is awesome? Liang Shuang asked questions and wanted to interact with his audience. Su Sui shook his head cooperatively. Liang Shuang continued, it is said that his mother is a well-known cello player, and his father seems to be a businessman. I heard that when he was in high school, he was originally a music and art student, learning the cello. Yes, after preparing for the college entrance examination, I went to Austria to study and specialize in music, but guess what? The commander was forced to turn his back, and suddenly changed his intentions and chose to stay in China to learn to fly, or as a cultural student, and enter Bihang University with an excellent score. Liang Shuang said. His grandfather was an engineer in the manufacture of national aircraft, but he has retired for several years now. His grandmother is a music professor at a university. With this background, I feel that he will not be bad at learning anything, Liang Shuang said and sighed. I really envy this kind of people, who are very good at everything and always look like they are at ease. You are also very good, except for a little less hair. Su Sui comforted. Liang Shuang laughed out loud. She didn't expect Su Sui to be such a good-looking person and still be cold and humorous. Liang Shuang remembered another gossip, and whispered, I read the post-bar and said that Zhou Jing's had his tattoos washed in order to pass the medical examination before the college entrance examination. I think it's a bit fake, let's blow it. No, it's true. Su Sui suddenly said, his tone firm. Liang Shuang stayed for 2 seconds, then winked at her, how do you know it's true? Is it possible that you also quietly follow him, do you like him? Being accidentally pierced into the girl's mind, Su Sui's Hung drank water, choked on hearing the words, coughed violently, his face flushed. Liang Shuang immediately raised his hand to give her comfort. Su Sui and Zhou Jing's are both in the sky. They are classmates. She didn't intentionally conceal it, but it was troublesome to explain. Besides, she didn't make much sense to say it. Zhou Jing's shouldn't remember her anymore. Su Sui glanced at the two people not far away. Bai Yuya was eating. Zhou Jing's obviously came to accompany her, and he came to accompany her without eating, leaning back in the seat lazily and playing games with his mobile phone. His other hand was resting on the table, and the light blue blood vessels on the back of his hand were obvious, slender, and clean. I guess, you see, there is a white print on the back of his hand, which is obviously left behind after a tattoo. Su Sulai had an idea. Liang Shuang looked back and saw that there was an abrupt white mark on the back of Zhou Jing's hand, which looked like the tattoo had just been washed. Master of details. Liang Shuang gave Su Sui a thumbs up. After eating, Su Sui went back to the bedroom and packed a portion of shrimp and egg for Hu Zixi by the way. Hu Kyungzi immediately hugged her and cried, "Thank you for being here." Su Sui patted her shoulder, and looked hesitant when he walked to the desk to pick up the book. Because Fenjia was ambiguous with other girls on the rooftop a week ago, she hadn't been to the rooftop for several days. But after all, I was afraid of seeing that scene in my heart, and Su Sui finally chose to go to the library. In the evening, Su Sui did a few sets of exercises, memorized some medical knowledge and returned to the bedroom from the library. Hu Kyungzi was sitting on the bed and painting her feet with nail polish, the color of grape purple, and the glittering powder on it. "Follow, do you want to apply it?" Hu Kyungzi shook her nail polish. "Forget it." Su Sui sat down and poured himself a glass of water. "I'm afraid I can't help but pick my feet." Ha 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 ha. Hu Zixi couldn't help laughing. What a weird problem was this? Su Sui has an innocent look, she has obsessive-compulsive disorder, if she paints it, she really can't help but pick it off. During the Chinese New Year last year, the little cousin forcibly pulled her to make her nails, but one day, the nails were clasped like a bald uncle. "Right, follow along, will you be free tomorrow Saturday?" Hu Kyungzi closed the lid and asked her, "Can you accompany me to Bihang for a while? I have something at my uncle's, and I have to go there." "Yes, I will accompany you." On the weekend, Hu Kyungzi slept until noon. The two cleaned up and went out together. When they passed the cafeteria, Su Sui's Hung was about to go there. Hu Kyungzi grabbed her and blinked at her, "Don't go, someone will invite us to dinner." Bihang University was right next to them, and it took about 10 minutes to get to the school gate. But their school was too big, they didn't find the Flying Academy after half an hour. Hu Kyungzi tweeted on WeChat, "In less than 10 minutes, Hu Kyungzi seemed to see the new world, her eyes excitedly waved to the opposite side, "Uncle, here we are." Su Sui stood aside and was watching Bihang's propaganda. He turned to look at it, and then she saw Zhou Jing's. He stood in the middle, with several boys following Zhongxing Penjiuidi behind him. Zhou Jing's held a cigarette between his fingers, and his pace was relaxed and relaxed. Several people gathered around him to chat and laugh, his most relaxed expression, with a cynical smile on his face. She never thought it was him. She caught a glimpse of the scarlet of his fingertips. As Zhou Jing's got closer, his brow bones and straight nose became clearer and clearer. Her heart beat fast, like that scarlet, faint but uncontrollable burning. Zhou Jing's apparently saw them too, and his hand with the cigarette raised his hand to his companions, and then walked towards them. There was a boy standing beside Zhou Jing's. When the two were relatively close, he raised his eyebrows and said deliberately, "Oh, isn't this Miss Ceci?" "Zixi Zixi," it sounded like she was owed to death. Hu Zixi ran over in 2 steps, punched the boy, curled her eyebrows and said, "Sheng Nanzhou, don't call me like that. My English name is Tracy. I think you owe it." Sheng Nanzhou's tone was serious. Seeing that it was 2 girls, Zhou Jing's pinched the cigarette and threw it into the trash can aside. Zhou Jing's walked up to them, his voice mixed with a little hoarse after smoking, and asked, "Have you eaten?" "No, I'm just waiting for your words." Hu Kyungzi remembered something, holding Su Sui's arm, "By the way, this is my roommate, called Su Sui." According to normal communication theory, Su Sui should have taken the initiative to say something at this time, but the two got too close, and her brain went blank. Zhou Jing's looked at the girl in front of him, the sense of familiarity flashed through his brain, quickly and unable to grasp, he frowned, raised his eyelids and glanced at her, the voice was a grainy feeling after rubbing, deep and nice. Hello, Zhou Jing's. Zhou Jing's obviously did not remember her, and Su Sui felt a sense of loss in his heart. Then he plucked up the courage to say hello. Zhou Jing's acted generously and took them directly to the small restaurant on the second floor of the canteen to open a small stove. Hu Qingzi and Sheng Nanzhou were singing the double song throughout the meal, and Zhou Jing's occasionally agreed casually. Hu Qingzi doesn't like to eat celery. Sheng Nanzhou insisted on forcing her to eat it. He even put all of her bowl into her bowl and asked her, "Do you know why your erha looks ugly?" Sheng Nanzhou, based on the concept of education, waited for Hu Qingzi to ask why, but Hu Qingzi ignored him, so he could directly educate him that it was picky eaters. As a result, Hu Qingzi picked out all the celery, with a serious tone, "Because it looks like you." Sheng Nanzhou was so angry that he couldn't say a word. "Uncle, don't you think?" Hu Qingzi asked Zhou Jing's to comment. Zhou Jing's tilted his head and glanced at Sheng Nanzhou, suffocating a bad energy, "Don't say it, it's really alike." Sheng Nanzhou. Su Sui followed them with a light smile. Sheng Nanzhou was too lazy to pay attention to them. Then he looked at Su Sui and said, "Sister Su, I haven't introduced herself yet. My name is Sheng Nanzhou. Zixie's friend is my friend. You can come to me if you have anything to do in the future. Hey, why don't you ask Zhou Jing's to come to you if you have something to do?" Hu Qingzi dismantled his desk mercilessly and looked at the other person with a smile, "Uncle, don't you think?" Although it was a joke, Su Sui's heart tightened. She pretended to lower her head to eat inadvertently, but was actually waiting for Zhou Jing's answer. Zhou Jing's was about to speak, when the mobile phone placed on the table vibrated, and the caller ID was Bai Yu. Zhou Jing's picked up the phone and put it in his ear to listen to the call. Su Sui sat opposite him and saw that his throat was smoothly curved. He put his left hand on the table, and his hand had a ring that pulled the carbonated soda one after another. The ice mist was on his slender fingertips. "Yes, something," and other brief words rang in my ears, and I didn't know what was said over there, Zhou Jing snorted lightly. Su Sui sat like pins and needles, but felt difficult. "Hang up," Zhou Jing said. After hanging up the phone, Sheng Nanzhou teased, "Tisk, Master Zhou is awesome. My girlfriend takes the initiative to make 10 calls a day, and I haven't seen him call one back. Speaking of which, your girlfriend actually shares the same dormitory with me, but she doesn't seem to know my relationship with you. Didn't you tell her?" Hu Zixi said. "Lazy." Zhou Jing's put out a word. They were eating in the canteen. A classmate of Zhou Jing's, Lu, came over in the middle of the meal. He looked at the well-behaved Su Sui and said, "I changed my girlfriend so soon, and changed my taste." Su Sui was ridiculed a little cramped, and this scene happened to fall in Zhou Jing's eyes. Lu was sitting next to him. Zhou Jing's pressed his tongue to his left cheek and smiled, stretched out his hand and lifted it forward, beckoning him to come. Zhou Jing's slender fingers were placed on the pull ring. De Lu leaned down with a gossip expression on his face, and put his other hand on his neck with a click. The pull ring was torn apart, and white bubbles gushing out. Liu's face was confused. De Lu struggled immediately. Zhou Jing's leaned back on the chair, and easily held him with his other hand. De Lu was so embarrassed that he couldn't open his eyes because of the bubbles. It made Lu repeatedly begged for mercy, "I was wrong," and Zhou Jing's let him go. The bubbles quickly evaporated into water, dripping wet on his face, not to mention how embarrassed he was. "Guess." Zhou Jing smiled locally, looking dull. "Ha ha 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 ha." The people around them leaned forward and backward with a smile. "Zhou Jing's is like this. When talking to you well, he will use some tricks to make you understand that this should not be the case and disrespect others. Lu realized his expression when he looked at him. You're really good. Lu knew that he had made a joke. When he was about to apologize, Su Sui took a tissue and wiped his face. Lu was even more embarrassed. I'm sorry, sister, I'll just make a joke with this guy. It doesn't matter. Su Sunyo's soft voice revealed a good temper. Okay, get out. Zhou Jing scolded with a smile. After the party finished eating, Su Sui accompanied Hu Kyungzi back to Zhou Jing's to get things back to the dormitory. When passing by the Bihang playground, a group of boys with well-developed muscles and green training suits, in order to train their anti-bump ability, spin around on a solid roll, or to enhance their physical fitness, they jogged and shouted, soaring into the sky, guard the territory. In the evening, the sunset was shining, sweat dripped down their cheeks, and loud and powerful slogans echoed on the playground. Hu Kyungzi looked at them directly, and Sheng Nanzhou snapped his fingers in front of her. Look at it, all the Harazis are flowing out. The two ready-made handsome guys with short heads put them in front of you and don't look at them, so they have to look back. Sheng Nanzhou said. Bah! Hu Kyungzi moved his hand away. Zhou Jing's walked in front with one hand shaking, and suddenly, he met an acquaintance and nodded at him, Senior. Are you used to coming here for more than a month? The senior patted him on the shoulder familiarly, and it seemed that the two had known each other for a long time. Zhou Jing's nodded, and the senior smiled. At the opening ceremony of the school, you, as a student representative, were in the limelight. Even our class is discussing you, but the speech was wonderful. Nonsense! Zhou Jing's curled his lips needlessly. After the seniors left, Zhou Jing's led the two girls into the boys' dormitory, but refused to let them go upstairs and let people wait downstairs. Zhou Jing's was about to go upstairs. On the second floor, the boy chatting against the railing saw two beauties standing downstairs, especially Su Sui, who was white and soft, so he could flirt with him, and whistled at her. Zhou Jing stuck in his pocket and glanced at them from the bottom up, his eyes calm, revealing that you are almost getting it. The boys on the second floor saw Zhou Jing's. They all looked sad and didn't dare to whistle anymore, so he went upstairs. 10 minutes later, Zhou Jing's threw a gift box into Hu Kyungzi's arms and lifted his chin at the two of them. Go! On the balcony on the 5th floor, Zhou Jing's had a cigarette in his mouth, and his dark eyes were staring at the figures of the two people downstairs, especially on the girl in the white dress. Sheng Nanzhou opened the lighter box and lit Zhou Jing's a cigarette. Seeing his thoughtful eyes, he joked, "Is this enough to be remembered?" Zhou Jing's bit the cigarette and turned his head to light the orange fire. He took a puff of the cigarette, held the cigarette in his hand, and asked, "Do you think I would like this?" He never touched such a good student. Zhou Jing's just thought she was familiar. On the way back, Su Sui couldn't help asking, "Sixi, why is Zhou Jing's your uncle? Our two families are somewhat related." "He is actually my younger uncle, and we all grew up together," Hu Kyungzi explained. After returning to school, Hu Zixi went to get the courier, and Su Sui went back to the dormitory first. Seeing that she was about to walk into the door of the dormitory, suddenly an orange cat flew out of the grass and yelled at Su meowing. The kitten stepped on the chubby solace of her feet and came to Su Sui. Her amber eyes kept looking at it, and she tried to rub her trouser legs. Su Sui's heart softened. She squatted down and found that there was a wound on its face, and the blood was still on it. It looked like he had just run out and was cut by a weed flower thorn. Su Sui got up, bought a bottle of mineral water and ham sausage at the dormitory canteen, then turned it back in front of it, and carefully cleaned the cat's wound with mineral water, and then tore open the ham sausage. The kitten followed her palm with a bite. "Stand up." After feeding, Su Sui patted its head, "I'm leaving, I can't support you." In the evening, none of the roommates came back. Su Sui opened his laptop and searched the internet for a speech by the new student representative of Bihang University. The web page quickly gave the answer. Su Sui sat in front of the computer, quietly watching Zhou Jing's in the video. Zhou Jing stood on the stage, and the audience was a little noisy. He stretched out his long arms and suddenly raised the microphone in front of him. The sarcasm on his face was obvious, and the students below made a burst of laughter. The director, who is only 1 meter tall and just finished speaking, has a headache. The students in this class are not easy to take. After adjusting the microphone, Zhou Jing stood in front of everyone and Shi Shiran said, "Dear students, I will make a long story short. Of course, you can also think that I am talking nonsense." Wow! Someone in the audience made a teasing voice. I believe many people have a preliminary understanding of Bihang after the end of the military training. I don't care if you still have a dream, or if you are retired by the alarm that rings at 6 o'clock every day. Zhou Jing's dark eyes scanned. In the next lap, 3-point riffraff mixed with 7-point carelessness, it may be more difficult in the future. The elimination rate will become a disaster for pilots, and they will be grounded. I don't want to worry about this. I read a sentence from the book before, and I gave it to everyone who chose to become a pilot. The audience suddenly fell silent, waiting for Zhou Jing's to say something. Zhou Jing stood in the audience, his eyes staring at the people in the audience, and his voice carried an arrogant arrogance. God is silent, everything is up to me. The students in the audience calmed down again, and the silence spread to every corner. Zhou Jing smiled lightly, folded the speech in his hand into a paper airplane, and threw it at the stage. The white paper plane fluttered in midair for a circle, and then flew to the audience like a sea of people. There was a burst of applause and cheers among the students. All the classmates, as if infected by this sentence, jumped upwards, trying to catch the paper airplane. It was their carnival, and they shouted, "I want to be the best pilot. I will definitely take pictures of the blue sky for my mother." When the wind blew, the corner of Zhou Jing's black t-shirt was blown up. He stood on the stage, watching the classmates hustling together, and slowly smiled. The black-clothed boy, with a bitter appearance, smiled frivolously and wantonly as before. Su Sui looked at Zhou Jing's on the screen, his heart pounding uncontrollably, and his heart surged. There are a lot of comments below the video. She clicked over to watch them one by one. Someone asked, "Who is this person? Why are you so proud?" Enthusiastic alumni answer, "It's superficial. I went to the Colorado Grand Canyon to play skydiving after the college entrance examination, and got the private photos of the helicopter." Suddenly, there was a sound of pushing the door outside, and Su Sui used the mouse to close the web page in a panic. Liang Shuang opened the door carelessly. As soon as he entered the door, he put his arms around Su Sui's shoulder and said, "Follow Sui, didn't you tell me that you want to find a part-time job? I happen to know a senior sister who was looking for a tutor. I gave her business card. Push it to you." Su Sui nodded, "Okay, thank you." "You're welcome." Liang Shuang squeezed her face again, feeling really good. Su Sui took the initiative to introduce herself after adding the senior sister. The elder sister is very enthusiastic and said, "Hello, I heard Liang Shuang said, you are the student of the clinical medicine department who has a neat anatomy and audacity. She has always praised you as a schoolmaster. My aunt is looking for a tutor to teach a 6th grade child math and English. She goes once a week, but the duration is 2 hours. Can you allocate time?" Su Sui asked, "Where is the address roughly?" The elder sister replied, "Amber Lane in Xinhe district. Because there is no direct subway, it takes about an hour to make several bus transfers." "It's more than an hour, it's a little far away. It would be great if there is a direct subway line," and Su Sui is a bit motion sick. When she was hesitating whether to go, the senior sister sent a message again, "Many people are because of the distance problem. Anyway, tutors are not easy to find, so you can give me a face. Can you go to an interview on weekends?" In case you like the kids in that family very much, if it is not suitable, you can refuse it. It's all for this, and it wouldn't be good to refuse, so Su Sui agreed to go to the interview. No one thought that the next day in the dormitory would not be peaceful. Bai Yuyu came back one day and suddenly cried in the dormitory. After crying, she called again. As a result, she couldn't get through after several calls, and she was so angry that she smashed her phone. It's torn apart. Hu Kyungzi comforted her, "Don't cry, what happened?" Su Sui squatted down silently and cleaned up the debris on the ground. Bai Yuya wiped away the tears from the corner of her eyes, her voice was cold, "It's nothing, I quarreled with her boyfriend." Within 2 days, people in the class began to rumors that Bai Yuya was dumped by her boyfriend, and that she went to the other party's dormitory and waited downstairs for a whole night but failed to reconcile. The opinions are divided. Liang Shuang and the others don't believe it. It's normal for couples to quarrel. On Thursday afternoon, Hu Kyungzi received a text message in the bedroom and sat up from the bed, and blinked at Su. "Zhou Jings came to our school to do something. He is just free now. Let's go and take you to a meal." Hu Kyungzi took Su Sui to the East Canteen, and Sheng Nanzhou was also there. They also asked Su Sui to recommend dishes. Su Sugong ordered a casserole of rice noodles, and said with a puffed face, "You may not like what I ordered." Sheng Nanzhou raised his eyebrows, "This is a bit of a look down on people, brother, I dare not eat anything." At this time, the ant in the cafeteria at the window just pushed out a portion of casserole rice noodles. When Sheng Nanzhou glanced at it, it was abnormally spicy, and there was bottomless red oil floating on it. Sheng Nanzhou clasped his fists in both hands, "Farewell. Unexpectedly, you are still a choking pepper. Eat you, talk so much." Zhou Jing stood behind and kicked him. "Don't get in the way if you don't eat." At the dinner table, the gossiping classmate Xiao Hu didn't even remove the chopsticks, and started talking, "Uncle, what's the matter with Bai Yuyu? She always cries in the dormitory. It is said that you broke up, but Bai Yuyu said you guys arguing. Divided." Zhou Jing said lightly. Su Sui's hung lowered her head and sucked the powder, and the soup made a sizzling noise in the pot. Hearing Zhou Jing's words was so shocked that she was choked with fright. The hotness rushed to her throat, and it was painful and hot. She coughed so that her eyes were filled with dampness. Suddenly, a hand with clear knuckles pushed a glass of water over. Su Sui's eyes hit Zhou Jing's and his heart suddenly became flustered. His eyes were like rocks on the bottom of a river. When the water receded, they looked like black rocks, silent and shiny. Zhou Jing's is staring at her. "Thank you." Su Sui picked up the water next to him and quickly raised his head to drink, so as to avoid Zhou Jing's sight. She took a few sips of water, and her throat felt a little better. "Are you sad?" Hu Kyungzi asked. He. Sheng Nanzhou sneered, turned around and approached Zhou Jing's, touching his chest with his hands, in an artificial tone, "Shuhuan, you have no heart." If Zhou Jing's wasn't surprised, he would lean over his ears, in a petting tone, and speak in a breath, "Goodbye, I'll go back to you to touch it at night." Sheng Nanzhou withdrew from him like an electric shock, kept a distance from Zhou Jing's, and cursed, "Stop to seduce me, I'm straight. Your Lord Zhou doesn't care about the breakup. It's sad to lose him in Hay," Sheng Nanzhou said. "No, you picked it up and kept it for less than a month, and you took it to the hospital for injections or something. You left so soon." Hu Kyungzi said. "Well," Zhou Jing's replied faintly, and said in a low voice, "Witty cat." After the group of people finished eating, Zhou Jing's went to the toilet at the back of the canteen to wash his hands. When he came out, he took a tissue and wiped his hands, and said, "Go away. Bye fat girl, bye sister Su." Sheng Nanzhou waved at them with a grin. Su Sui nodded. Hu Kyungzi immediately clenched her fists and cursed, "Who wants to see you?" After they left, Su Sui and Hu Kyungzi walked back to the dormitory side by side. Although they knew about the breakup of Bai Yuyu and Zhou Jing's, they decided to pretend not to know. Because Bai Yuyu lost her love this time, she seemed really sad. The new week came. It happened to rain the night before, and I opened the door and walked out. The air was filled with the fragrance of green grass, mixed with the smell of rain soaking into the soil. It didn't take long for Su Sugong to get on the bus. The weather changed and the sun came out soon. The shining sun penetrated the window glass and was a little dazzling. Su Sui subconsciously reached out his hand to cover his eyes. The appointment with the other party for the interview with the tutor was at 4 in the afternoon. Su Sui changed the bus 3 times in a row. She was sweating and her clothes clung to her back. She was sitting in the car and she felt like vomiting. Paled face. Finally, Su Suikan got off the car before 4 o'clock, and she walked into Amber Lane, looking for number 79 Amber Lane one by one according to the address given by the senior sister. Not long after getting out of the car, Su Sui's nausea was still very serious in her body. She walked very slowly. Suddenly, she saw a convenience store not far away. The name of the store was 711 with a red number 7 in the center of the store sign. It is a green border. Su Sui walked over, and the automatic induction slowly opened, making a ding sound. "Welcome." A lazy, emotional voice sounded. Su Sui looked over and turned out to be Zhou Jing's. The boy casually nestled on the chair at the cashier counter, his dark eyelashes drooping, his expression faint. He looked as though he was not awake. He bit a cigarette diagonally, his elbows were bent, his muscles were tight, and he was playing games with his head down. Viewed from the side, the thorns on the back of his neck were obvious, cold and intriguing. Seeing is frozen in the same posture for too long. Zhou Jing's raised his hand and rubbed his neck. When he raised his head, he saw Su Sui and raised his eyebrows slightly. "Why are you? I have something to come here." Su Sui's tone was a little nervous. Zhou Jing's nodded his head indifferently, lowered his head and played the game again. Su Sui turned around and stood in a row of freezers to pick and choose, and the sound of the game KO kept coming from behind him. Zhou Jing's was obviously not looking at her, but Su Sui was too nervous, because the two were alone in the same space. Su Sui was sluggish for a while, forgetting what she was going to buy in the convenience store. The air conditioner in the freezer rushed over, making her so cold. Finally, she hurriedly picked a box of white peach-flavored milk. When checking out, Zhou Jing's threw his mobile phone aside, stood up, and scanned the code. When Su Sui paid the money, Zhou Jing's noticed her strangeness. Her face was abnormally pale, and her two eyes were particularly dark and weak. "What's wrong with you? My face is not so good." Zhou Jing's voice was low and he was staring at her. "A little motion sickness." Su Sui replied. Zhou Jing's pressed his tongue to his left cheek and smiled. He threw a sentence, "Wait." He turned around and found a jacket, shaking it up and down vigorously, and a box of pressed candy fell into his palm. Zhou Jing's opened the lid, picked up a piece of candy and threw it into his mouth, with a piece of candy rolled on the tip of his tongue. The mint was bitten and rattled, and his voice was vague, "Reach out." Su Sui's slender eyelashes trembled, stretched out his palm, and suddenly dropped a handful of green mints out of thin air, like a reward for her. She did not dare to raise her head for fear of touching his sight, staring blankly at his hand. Her fingers were distinct, and there was a black mole on the tiger's mouth, dangling in front of her eyes. "I often eat this candy, it seems to be useful for stopping dizziness." Zhou Jing's held a cigarette in his mouth and his voice was vague. 5 minutes later, Su Sui walked out of the convenience store. She stood under the sun, holding the candy in her palm tightly, her palms covered with sweat. On that day, she was about to melt in the sun, but she was extremely happy. Su Sui opened a piece of candy and put the candy wrapper in her pocket. The mint was obviously cold, but she tasted the sweetness. "Who knows, Coincidences of fate happened one after another on the same day. She went the wrong way, and walked around for half an hour to find number 79 Amber Lane, and found that this household was just behind the convenience store 711. Su Sui stood at the door and rang the doorbell politely. The other party gave a hey and walked over to open the door quickly. It was an aunt who opened the door. The nanny led Su Sui in before she saw the real hostess of the house. The other party is a woman in her 40s, with a beautiful appearance, wearing a skirt that wraps her hips, and she is full of charm. Xiao Su, right? Your senior sister has already told me, just call me Aunt Cheng, come and have some fruit, I just cut it. The other party said enthusiastically. Thank you. Su Sui looked at her and asked, who wants to make up the lesson? Look at my brain, I forgot to say, it's my youngest son, I told him to go downstairs. Aunt Cheng shouted at the top of the stairs, Sheng Yanjia, come down, the new teacher is here, don't pester your brother playing games. No response. Aunt Cheng smiled in embarrassment, Xiao Su, would you like to go up with me? I just want to see your trial class. Okay. Su Sui nodded. Su Sui followed the woman upstairs, and the two walked to the third room on the left. Su Sui stood at the door and saw two people playing games at a glance. Sheng Yanjia, still pestering Jing's brother to play games, I'll give you 3 seconds, get out, Aunt Sheng said calmly. Uncle Li, who collects scraps downstairs, wants to take your game console for a long time. The sound of the game stopped abruptly. Hearing the familiar name, Su Sui's heart beat. Zhou Jing's put down the handle of the switch, and when he turned his head to see Su, he was stunned, and then he was happy. What a coincidence! Class is in. Zhou Jing stood up and touched the child's head. Sheng Yanjia hugged Zhou Jing's trouser legs and pleaded bitterly, brother, please, take me to play another round. Don't fight, you are too bad. Zhou Jing's knelt down and broke his hands one by one, humming lazily, go to class. When Zhou Jing's walked out of the room, he raised his eyebrows and stood in front of Su Sui. Confronted with the doubts in her eyes, he briefly explained, he is Sheng Nanzou's own brother, and I live nearby. The convenience store belongs to his house. I will help. Look at it for a while, because Aunt Sheng went to play cards. After being sued by the junior, Aunt Sheng was very shameless, so she pushed Zhou Jing's out, preemptively, don't stop teacher Xiao Su from attending class. Row. The trial time was relatively short. Su Sui spent about 30 minutes talking. Aunt Sheng said that she was satisfied and asked her little son to welcome the new teacher. Sheng Yanjia wore a small curly hair, and his fat little face was clearly reluctant, but he could only say against his will, Teacher Xiao Su, you are welcome. Su Sui smiled, and Aunt Sheng sent her out together. It happened to meet Zhou Jing sitting on the sofa and was about to leave. Aunt Sheng immediately stopped him, where are you going? Where else? Go home. Zhou Jing smiled helplessly. No, you are the only one in your family. Come back and stay here for dinner. Auntie will make you your favorite roasted eggplant. Aunt Sheng said. Zhou Jing smiled lazily, if this continues, I will soon become your son. That's right, I wanted to sever the mother-child relationship with Sheng Nanzou a long time ago, and you just happened to continue. Aunt Sheng said blankly. Zhou Jing's lowered his head and smiled, his shoulders trembled, his expression relaxed and happy, and he didn't leave in the end. Aunt Sheng sent Su Sui out and took her hand in a grotesque tone, I have said that I will stay for a meal. Su Sui smiled and shook his head, I still have something to do. I will go to the library later. Su, I was very satisfied with your trial class just now. Sheng Yan adds that there will be a quiz in half a year next year. This kid's score I raise a pig better than him. I hope you can help him. Of course. I know your worries about the journey, it really took a little bit of effort to come here, or you can think about it tonight, and you can contact your senior sister at that time. Good. Su Sui nodded. In the evening, Su Sui returned to the bedroom. She found a clean glass jar and put all the mints that Zhou Jing's gave her. She couldn't bear to eat one. At 10 o'clock, she was the only one in the bedroom, and Su Sui held his chin and looked at the glass jar in a daze. Suddenly, Hu Qingzi pushed the door in and said, "Follow, think I don't have one?" "Yes." Su Sui smiled sweetly. "I heard from Liang Shuang today that you went to interview for a tutor, how is it?" Hu Qingzi sat down. Su Sui poured her a glass of water, and thought for a while, "It's pretty good. As it happens, the home I interviewed is actually from Sheng Nanzhou's family, and the student I want to teach is his younger brother. Amber Lane. Damn, who turned you so far? The school is a bit far away. If you're tired, just follow along." Hu Qingzi looked distressed, but Sheng Nanzhou's brother seems to be looking for a tutor. "Yeah," Su Sui replied. She remembered what she asked Hu Qingzi, her tone of hesitation and fear that she was overly concerned. "Zixi, I heard Aunt Sheng say that Zhou Jing's lives alone." Hu Qingzi sighed, "Anyway, their family relationship is a bit complicated. They were a family living in Amber Lane before. His mother died in the 3rd grade of junior high school, and his father planned to move out, but Zhou Jing's refused. He still lives in that villa, and he is alone. Fortunately, he has raised a German shepherd since he was a child and can accompany him. That's it." Su Sui Ying said. She suddenly remembered Zhou Jing sitting on the sofa in the afternoon, and when Aunt Sheng left him for dinner, his eyes were slightly smiling. Not long after, the senior sister sent a message asking if she had considered her family education. Su Sui thought of those dark and silent eyes, and edited in the dialogue box, "After thinking about it, I want to go." Su Sui finally agreed to become Sheng Yanjia's tutor. During class on the weekend, she deliberately dressed up, wearing a white chinek knit blouse with a pair of blue jeans underneath, with her hips cocked, youthful and beautiful. She was combing her hair in front of the mirror, showing her waist. String. "Wow, follow along, you are simply the spokesperson of the innocent lady, I want to soak you." Hu Qingzi stepped forward to pounce on her. Su Sui pierced the head of a ball, his forehead was full, and the tail of his eyes was slightly raised, filling a beautiful and attractive arc. She packed her things while avoiding Hu Zixi's pursuit. "Okay, you have to choose between me and your idol," Su Sui smiled. "Then I still just want to prostitute my idol," Hu Qingzi replied decisively. After the fight with Hu Qingzi, Su Sui packed up and went out. This time, she learned how to behave. She bought a motion sickness sticker in advance and put it behind her ear. Then, after 3 bus transfers, she arrived at number 79 Amber Lane. Su Sui came to Sheng Nanjia's house, and the curly-haired boy was still playing games. When Sheng Yanjia saw that the teacher was coming, he was afraid of her complaint, and reluctantly put down the gamepad. Unexpectedly, during a small time in class, Sheng Yanjia's degree of cooperation was fairly high. Su Sui first took a set of papers to test his foundation, and then gave targeted lectures based on his shortcomings. He was still cooperating and didn't make a fuss, but when he started to do the test papers in the 2nd class, Sheng Yanjia began to sigh and he was obviously unable to concentrate. It turns out that the problem is here. Su Sui took the test paper and tapped little Kuli's head lightly. "How old are you?" I start to sigh and do the questions quickly. "Teacher Xiao Su, you don't understand. Like our generation, we are filled with learning all day long. Adults don't even know where our childhood is." Sheng Yan added a look of youth. Su Sui asked him, "Then where is your childhood?" "In Zelda, Westworld etc." Little Curly replied without hesitation. Su Sui glanced at the time and said, "If you can shorten the 1-hour test paper to 40 minutes, I can play the game with you for 20 minutes. Take you through the customs." Su Sui added. "Hey, the most awesome game player in the world, I only admire my Jing's brother. Little Curly looked dissatisfied. Su Sui was not irritated at all, and his tone was flat. Really? Then from today, you have a second person to admire. Sheng Yanjia was stimulated. He forced himself to concentrate on writing the test paper quickly, with a provocative tone. How about it, the teacher will play a game. Little devil, it's not time for get out of class, I just promised you to play games, but not now. Su Sui said. Little Curly immediately lay down in frustration. Su Sui quickly reviewed the papers for him, then explained the problem-solving methods to him, and circled the key points for him. I'm afraid Su Suishan knows the truth about Mei quenching thirst. He first gave people expectations, and then pushed Sheng Yanjia forward. Sure enough, after 2 hours, Sheng Yanjia felt that he had chewed through all the knowledge that he didn't understand. He can't help but admire Su Sui. Teacher, the time has come to fulfill the promise. Sheng Yanjia thought about his game. Sheng Yanjia immediately turned on the switch, and then projected. He took a handle to Su Sui, took the remote control and asked, Teacher, what game do you play? Big Chaos, Su Sui said dryly in the lecture, and said weakly, can you pour a glass of water for your teacher? Sheng Yanjia was too considerate as a boy, so he brought in a basket of snacks. Su Sui picked a bag of milk and a portion of sea salt cheese bread meant to cushion his stomach. Sitting on the soft carpet, the two began the game journey. Just 10 minutes into the game, Su Sui took him all the way out of the labyrinth. It was extremely smooth, and Sheng Yan added the next word, serve. In the middle of playing the game, Su Sui held the handle and looked at the screen and asked casually, why didn't you see your brother? Sheng Yanjia turned his head and asked vigilantly, which brother are you asking? Su Sui's heartbeat missed a beat, and she pretended to look straight ahead calmly, just ask any questions. Oh, I don't know about them. My brother often comes back. Brother Jing's doesn't necessarily come back. If he is in a relationship, he will rarely come back. When he is single, he will come back more frequently. Sheng Yanjia replied. Su Sun sighed in his heart. Su Sui is very powerful, leading Sheng Yanjia all the way through the adventure. Sheng Yanjia likes to play games and hug people's thighs. When the game screen shows victory, he is so excited that he slaps Su Sui in the palm. She was too hungry, and quickly bit a piece of bread. Sheng Yanjia used the remote control to light up. Just as he was about to enter the next round, there was a knock on the door. Without turning his head, he responded, go in. Sheng Nanzhou opened the door and walked in, standing beside Zhou Jing's with his hands in his pockets. Brother! Sheng Yanjia threw away the gamepad and walked towards the door. Su Sui turned her head back in shock. At this moment, she was sitting cross-legged on the carpet, with a bag of milk in her mouth, and her lips were covered with crumbs, showing no image. Sheng Nanzhou opened his arms, but Sheng Yanjia rushed towards Zhou Jing's. The former sneered, you can change your surname. Brother, you don't know how good teacher Xiao Su is. He can fly in games and is the king of chaos. Sheng Yanjia began to share their achievements. Sheng Nanzhou looked surprised, sister, you can't tell, you can still play games by yourself with such a good-behaved person. Zhou Jing's glanced over at a glance, his tone was always casual, like playing games. From the moment he entered the door, Su Sui's expression was a little flustered. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand indiscriminately. She didn't throw away the gnawed bread on the table, so she had to hold her hand tightly and hide it behind her. Just learn when the pressure is high, playing with it is more decompressive. Su Sui tried his best to keep the surface calm, and his eyelashes were naturally raised. You can find me when you want to play. Su Sui felt regretful as soon as the words were spoken. What is she talking about? Teacher, you are partial. Sheng Yanjia was not convinced. Sheng Nanzhou gave Sheng Yan a slap, otherwise, except for you in this room, we don't have the pressure to go to school. Sheng Yanjia was speechless, and Su Sui's face was a little red, feeling that he had lost too much face here, and he hurriedly packed his things and left. Su Sui hurried downstairs holding the textbook. As soon as he walked out of the door, he saw Aunt Cheng and said, "Aunt Cheng, the class is over, I will leave first." Su greeted her with her. Aunt Cheng said with a smile, "Stay here for dinner." "No, Su Sui refused subconsciously. As a result, Aunt Cheng was thin and strong, and directly pushed Su Suji back to the yard, so enthusiastic that she was unable to parry. Su Sui was left for dinner like this. Cheng's father was still working overtime at the company to deal with important tasks and did not come back for dinner. In addition to Zhou Jing's, there were 2 pairs of live treasures from the Cheng family brothers at the dinner table. After eating, it was already past 8 o'clock, and Su Sui thanked Aunt Cheng again and prepared to go back. Aunt Cheng glanced at the dark sky outside, and said, "This is the point for a meal. I don't worry about you going back alone. Nanzhou, you send teacher Xiao Su back." Sheng Nanzhou raised his hand and scratched his head, "But my car is under warranty." Su Sui looked cramped. She just wanted to say no need. Zhou Jing's bent over, picked up the car key on the table, and raised her eyelids, "Let's go, I'll send it." "Look at my memory. I forgot that the 2 of you and teacher Xiao Su are from 2 schools next door. When you go home on the weekend, you will pick her up by the way." Aunt Cheng patted her head and exhorted, "Your kid will be responsible for her. Safely send me to school." Zhou Jing's was walking with his hands in his trouser pockets, and without turning his head back, he freed up one hand in a gesture of okay. I don't know what he promised. Su Sui followed him step by step with the book in her arms, and she found that Zhou Jing's house was next door to Shennanzhou No. 80 Amber Lane. Compared to the bright lights of the Sheng family, the magnificent and large-sized villa of Zhou Jing's house did not even light up a single lamp, and it was terribly quiet, showing a trace of bleakness and loneliness. A black motorcycle stopped in front of his house. Zhou Jing's walked over and threw a blue helmet to her. Su Sui took it with both hands and was almost knocked down. She unbuttoned the buttons laboriously and put them on. The helmet was so big that it covered her entire face, and she didn't even show her eyes. Zhou Jing's, who was on the side, looked happy. He raised his hand and lifted the helmet on Su Sui's head. Su Sui's face was smothered with a hint of red, and he was breathing heavily at the moment. "Wait for me." Zhou Jing's threw a word. Zhou Jing's walked into the house, the voice-activated light came on, and soon he walked out, holding a bright yellow helmet in his hand. "Try this." Zhou Jing's handed her the top of his head. The helmet was obviously one size smaller, so Su would fit it on. Su Sui wears a bright yellow helmet with clear deer eyes, and a marvel pattern on his head. She has always been well behaved, and she looks fierce and cute. Zhou Jing's glanced at her, the smile on his face couldn't stop. Su Sui felt a little strange and asked, "Is there something wrong?" "Your helmet is Sheng Yanjia. He bought it when he was in 6th grade. At that time, he was the #1 fan of Marvel." Zhou Jing's voice was low, mixed with a smile. "I'm 1m65. Su Sui defended in a low voice. When Zhou Jing's was about to ride a bike, he noticed that something was holding his trouser legs. When he turned around, he found that his family demure didn't know when he slipped out. "Is it okay to smoke a cigarette?" Zhou Jing's asked. Su Sui nodded. She saw Zhou Jing's walk under the wall and took out a cigarette from the cigarette case. He held the cigarette with his fingers and knocked it on the face of the cigarette case, then bit it in his mouth, lowered his head and stretched out his hand to cover the fire. The smoke rolled out of the thin lips. Demure lied on Zhou Jing's feet obediently. He took the cigarette from his mouth, squatted down, and touched its head with his big hands. Demure licked his palm. The street lights were dim, and the expression on Zhou Jing's face was relaxed. For a moment, the unruly energy on his face disappeared completely, and Su Sui saw gentleness on his face. What's it called? Su Sui couldn't help asking. It's Quitus, one of the ancient Greek gods of war. With a cigarette in his mouth, Zhou Jing's laughed so that a piece of soot fell on his feet. However, this light-hearted atmosphere did not last long. Zhou Jing's cell phone vibrated in his pants pocket, and when he took a look, the expression on his face was not right for an instant. If he didn't answer, the phone rang unrelentingly. Zhou Jing's nodded to answer, and he didn't even bother to say politely, his tone was cold, "What's the matter?" Father Zhou was choked and was a little dissatisfied, and resisted his anger. "I will come back for a meal next week, my birthday, it just so happens that the whole family is happy." Hearing the words family, Zhou Jing's expression flashed a gloomy look, his brows filled with hostility, and he said directly, "I have something to do. You will leave your son when the father is kind and filial." Without waiting for the other party to reply, Zhou Jing's directly hung up, and he raised his hand to let the Mandarin go back and stand up again. The cigarette was thrown on the ground and was crushed the sole of the shoe, and finally the sporadic fire was extinguished. Zhou Jing's rode Su Sui back to school. He was obviously in a bad mood, and the wind was blowing. Su Sui was sitting in the back of the car. Although she could not see Zhou Jing's expression, she knew that the word unhappy was written all over his body. Zhou Jing's drove the car very fast. He leaned over and accelerated all the way. The gust of wind in his ears rushed to his face at double speed, and the scenery on both sides retreated like a movie with the accelerator key pressed. Su Sui's heart jumped to her throat. She had never taken a fast train before, nervous and scared. He was riding faster and faster, and Su Sui felt that everything she saw was blurred. Knowing that Zhou Jing's was venting, she could only silently grasp the bars on both sides of the car. Zhou Jing's finally vented his mood. Suddenly, he felt that Su Sui's whole person behind him was very stiff. He glanced back while wearing a helmet. Su Sui's fingertips were white, and he kept holding on to the horizontal bar. His heart moved, as if stung by something. Zhou Jing's unconsciously loosened the throttle and slowed down. Even he didn't know it, this was an inadvertent compromise. The speed of the car suddenly slowed down, and Su Sui felt that the hostility on his body also slowly disappeared, and he returned to his previous inattentive state. Summer is actually long gone, the evening breeze is a bit cool, but it blows very comfortably. The journey has been over half of the journey, and the speed has obviously slowed down, but he still feels Su Sui's unnaturalness. Zhou Jing's deep voice came along with the wind, "Afraid of me?" "Ah, no." Su Sui hurriedly replied. "It's just that I'm too nervous to be with you. I always want to say something to you but I'm afraid you don't like it." Su Sun said in his heart. "Then what are you doing so stiffly?" Zhou Jing's asked calmly, squinting to look forward. "It's downhill, hurry up." That is his favorite part of the road. There is always a feeling that life is accelerating but belongs to him alone. Su Sui stretched out his hand and carefully grabbed the corner of his clothes. Zhou Jing's led her down. His back was wide, especially the bowed shoulder blades. Su Sui could smell the smoke on his body and the slightly bitter basil smell. It's bitter and unique, full of breath a little bit. A gust of evening breeze blew. Su Sui's hair was messed up by the wind, and a strand of hair stuck to the back of his neck disobediently, ambiguous and uncontrollable. Su Sui stared at the light blue blood vessel on the back of his neck, stretched out his hand, and hooked it off very carefully, but his fingertips accidentally touched his skin, and then quickly closed his hand. "I shouldn't find it. Scrape it gently, like a feather." Zhou Jing's held the motorcycle handle and looked straight ahead, blinking his eyes. At the moment when it was downhill, Su Sui was surprised to find that the street lights on both sides of the road lit up one after another as if they were inductive, and the light floated, like a galaxy suddenly lit in the universe. Ying is beautiful, and she and him quietly like him are in the center of the universe. Suddenly, because of a turning slope, Su Sui was hit by inertial force and hit him on the back, and his whole body was attached to him. At this moment, Zhou Jing's, who was riding a motorcycle, froze. He felt Su Sui's soft cheeks against his back, and the girl's soft were still round. Zhou Jing's throat itched for an instant. Su Sui immediately sat upright and said in a panic, "I'm sorry." Zhou Jing's didn't answer immediately, with the tip of his tongue pressed against his chin, and he smirked, "It's really good, Su Sui, I take advantage of you, why do you apologize? Then do you want to apologize to me?" Zhou Jing's hummed a little, did not answer, and continued to drive forward. After arriving at the school gate, Su got out of the car, took off his helmet and returned it to him, and looked at him, "Thank you." Zhou Jing's was still riding a motorcycle, touched out his mobile phone, and read the news. It was all Aunt Cheng's concern for Su Sui. He seemed to think of something and raised his eyelids, "By the way, I can come to me for class on weekends. I have time to go back. By the way, I will pick you up." "Okay," Su Sui's eyes lit up, and she asked, "Then which class are you in the Flying Academy? I'll look for you again." Zhou Jing's took the phone and unlocked it, and handed it over in a casual tone, "Save trouble, you add me to WeChat." Su Sui felt like a dream on the way back to the dormitory. She actually added Zhou Jing's WeChat account. "When I was in high school, there was a QQ group in my class. At that time, everyone added people in batches. She was also mixed into it. She joined Zhou Jing's, but she had never spoken. He rarely posts updates, but Su Sui will watch them." Later, when he had WeChat in his third year of high school, Zhou Jing stopped using QQ and only used it to play games. Su Sui also completely lost his news. Su Sui happily walked into the door of the dormitory. Suddenly, the orange cat jumped out of the grass and yelled at her meowly. Knowing that he was hungry again, Su Sui went to the canteen to buy ham and milk. The kitten lay on Su Sui's palm and ate the ham. When he finished eating, she opened her amber eyes and licked Su Sui's palm. She smiled and bent her eyes, took out the phone and took a photo of its small palm. After Su Sui returned to the dormitory, he quickly took a shower, brushed his teeth, and went to bed with his mobile phone. She lay on the bed and boarded WeChat. Zhou Jing's showed up on his list. Zhou Jing's portrait is his German Shepherd. Click into his circle of friends to see, there are very few dynamics, only a few are landscape photos. A tangled face was shown on the screen, and Su Sugai remarked as Zhou Jing's, frowning and feeling uncomfortable, as if he was too blatant, for fear that others would see it, and finally changed it to ZJZ. ZJZ, no one knows this way, it's a secret that belongs to her alone. Su Sui repeatedly looked at Zhou Jing's dialog box, and a system message was displayed on it. "He is already your friend, come and chat." "He is already your friend, come and chat." Su Sui's heartbeat speeds up abnormally, for fear that a message will pop up on the screen in the next second. She typed "good night" in the dialog box to delete, and read "I've arrived, thank you tonight." Zhou Jing's didn't seem to say that she wanted to send him a message. Thinking of this, she deleted it again. Finally, Su Sui posted a circle of friends. The picture is the small palm of the cat she took downstairs. The text is written, "Hi." After sending it, Su Sui quit WeChat and checked the class schedule for the next day. The mobile phone displayed the class message. She clicked in and found a red message reminder in the circle of friends. She clicked on it, stopped breathing, opened her eyes slightly to confirm, and she couldn't believe it. 5 minutes ago, Zhou Jing's gave her a thumbs up. Halfway through November, after a rain on a certain day, the weather suddenly turned cooler. After the weather became cold, Su Sui changed into thicker clothes. She was recently preparing to participate in a medical skills competition, so she took a thermos cup every day, with 7 or 8 books in her elbow, and went to the library after class. On Tuesday, Su Sui was studying in the library as usual. There were still 2 days before the exam time. She planned to tidy up all the content and memorize the key points repeatedly. The library was quiet and silent, there were rows of figures in rows, and everyone was doing their own thing. At 10:30, Su Sui sat at the table. She glanced at the sky outside, dark clouds pressed downwards, as if it was going to rain. She forgot to bring her umbrella when she went out in the morning. Hu Kyungzi sent a message to remind her that it was going to rain and go back to the dormitory earlier. Su Sui opened the notebook, planning to quickly go over the key points and go back. Suddenly, a boy came across, panting lightly. He took out the thermos cup and took a sip and put it on the table, then took out the book, and then sat down to review. Su Sui glanced casually. He was from the same department, but he was reading a junior book. When Su Sui's Hung was about to leave, the other party happened to stretch out his right hand to take something, but when he retracted, he accidentally touched the water cup. The lid of the thermos cup was not tightened, and the water cup fell on the table with a slap, and the hot water spread over Su Sui. The notes are soaked in perfection. Su Sui immediately picked up the notebook and shook the water down. Shi Yueja immediately apologized and handed a tissue to him. Su Sui took the tissue and wiped it at random, making a gesture to leave with something. "Classmate, I'm really sorry, or you can give me the notes and I will help you to do it." Shi Yueja called to her, apologetic in his voice. "It's okay." The voice was unexpectedly calm, and Shi Yueja raised his eyes and caught a glimpse of a face with white lips and red lips. Su Sui hurriedly said something with the book and left. The movement just now was not small, and the boy on the side asked, "Brother, are you okay?" Shi Yueja shook his head and smiled, "It's okay." A light rain gradually began to fall on the road. Su Sui trot all the way with a book on his head. Halfway through the walk, a boy walked up to her with a long umbrella and asked, "Why don't you go?" Su Sui nodded, and the other party couldn't help but shoved a red umbrella for her and left. After a while, Su Sui's phone rang, and Hu Kyungzi called, "Have you received the umbrella?" "I got it. Is it your friend who gave the umbrella?" Su Sui smiled. "It must not be. That is the umbrella that this lady paid for you." Hu Kyungzi lay on the bed, kicking her legs up. This king can't bear to love her concubine to get a drop of rain. "Thank you, King Hu." The rain was getting bigger and bigger, and it was pouring down cracklingly, smashing into the puddles of different shades of flowers. When he was about to arrive at the dormitory, Su Sui's trousers had already been splashed. Su Sui was about to walk forward holding the umbrella handle. Suddenly, the familiar orange cat jumped out of the grass. It rushed to Su to meow a few words, and got under her umbrella naturally. One person and one cat just approached the corridor on the first floor. Su Sui took the umbrella, squatted down, and pulled out a piece of bread that he had not eaten in the morning from his bag to feed it. The kitten leaned into her palm and started eating bread, and finally licked the crumbs in Su Sui's hand. Su Sui touched the fur on its body, and when he stood up and was about to leave, the kitten bit her trousers to prevent her from leaving. Su Sui opened it, but the kitten followed wherever she went. The kitten's pupils were clean, and he yelled at it. Su Sui reacted, "I really can't raise you. The dormitory doesn't allow cats to be raised. It will be miserable if the auntie finds out." As a result, the kitten looked at her innocently. Su Sui glanced at the pouring rain outside the hallway, and kept stance, while the kitten was soaked and his beard was dirty. Su Sui has been feeding this stray cat for a while, and found that it is getting thinner and thinner. Su Sui was still soft-hearted in the end and squatted down and hugged it in his arms. Su Sui took out his mobile phone and asked the girls in the dormitory for their opinions. Bai Yuyu came back with 2 words, "Anyway, she doesn't often stay in the dormitory." Su Suidang meant it by default. When the cat came back, Hu Kyungzi stood upright from the bed. "What a cute little cat, do you really want to raise it?" "Well, raise it first. I plan to find a master for it. I shouldn't be able to raise it for a long time." Su Sui explained. The kitten was so dirty, Su Sui took a bath for him himself, and took out his own blanket to make a nest for him. Liang Shuang saw Su Sui busy going up and down, sweating on his forehead, and sighed, "Yes, you are like a female bodhisattva." Su Sui opened a box of goat milk and squatted down and poured it into a small box to feed it, and smiled, "Why, I just think it's a bit pitiful. And little animals no more grateful than people." Su Sui muttered to himself. "The people in the dormitory are very nice, and I don't have any comments on Su Sui's raising a cat." Bai Yu also said in the group that Su Sui could raise her for 2 days by default, but when she came back, she didn't know if she had eaten it with her ex-boyfriend. Her face was quite ugly. She saw that there were more cats in the dormitory and she threw the book on the table. Began to exasperate, "You really picked up this kind of dirty stuff? Is there no infectious disease or something?" Bai Yu sneered. She just wanted to find Su Suizu now. "Before I took it back, I checked it with a classmate from the Department of Animal Medicine. There is no infectious disease. Moreover, it will not stay here for a long time." Su Sui's tone was light, and his eyelashes were raised when he spoke. She didn't say the second half, and Bai Yu should be able to understand what she meant. Bai Yu twisted her beautiful eyebrows and couldn't say a word. Hu Qingzi laughed out loud, saying that Su Sui was good at talking, but that was not the case, at least he had his own bottom line. The skill test competition soon came, and Su Sui came to the test room ahead of time. By coincidence, Bai Yu and her were in the same test room. Bai Yu is the last in the first row, and Su Sui is third from the bottom in the second row. This time the invigilator is a teacher and student Cotter. Shi Yueja recognized Su Sui, who was wearing a thin velvet coat and buried his face in his collar when he divided the test papers. In the middle of the exam, Su Sui's Hung was answering the question intently. Suddenly, a ball of paper threw behind him, which flicked on the edge of the table and finally fell under her feet. Before she could open it, the examiner walked over to pick it up, spread it out, and looked serious. "What is this? I haven't had time to open it yet," Su Sui said calmly. The teacher was aroused by her innocuous attitude, and became angry. "This is cheating, what do you think of the teacher? You are embarrassed to cheat in the competition." "I didn't." Su Sui's tone was neither humble nor overbearing. She put down her pen. "If you judge me to cheat based on an inexplicable note, I can give up the exam." Shi Yueja came over and politely asked the teacher to go outside the corridor. "I don't know what Shi Yueja said to the teacher." He walked in and said to Su Sui, "You take the exam first. We didn't handle this matter well just now. I will give you a result after the exam." Su Sui nodded and took the test again. After the exam, it rained again outside, and Su Sui stood in the corridor looking at the rain curtain in a daze. The people behind them rubbed their shoulders and were very noisy with the sound of rain. Several discussions reached Su Sui's ears, but their voices were small but sharp. "Good students cheat too. I can't tell. I used her anatomy as a template before. I didn't expect to be so vain." Someone agreed. As the rain gradually subsided, Su Sui straightened his back and walked out under the umbrella. The story of Su Sui's being caught cheating was quickly spread, with different opinions, and the incident continued to ferment, but she did not seem to be affected at all, either feeding the cat or studying, making Hu Zixi nowhere to say anything to comfort her. When Bai Yu came back over the moon, there was only one person in the dormitory. She just finished washing her hair and was wiping her hair with a towel. The drops of water shook off the orange cat's back. She smiled when she saw it. Bai Yu walked to her desk with a book, and the orange cat stepped on her feet and sniffed. Bai Yu thought it was something, so she let out a scream, then found out that it was a cat, kicked it directly, and cursed, "Get out of the way." The orange cat was kicked aside, his eyes narrowed, and he made a hoop sound, and immediately pounced on her to bite her. Bai Yu turned pale with fright, and tears came out. Su Sui's tone was cold. 1017, come back. 1017 Hearing Su Sui's voice, he really relaxed. It turned around Bai Yu twice, slammed at her a few times, and then stepped on the soft solace of his feet and returned to Su Sui's side. Bai Yu's face turned pale, and she fell on the edge of the chair. Sorry, it won't be like this next time you don't kick it. When Su Sui's Hung wanted to say something, a text message came from her mobile phone. She took a look and took an umbrella and went out. Zhou Jing's and the others were halfway through the physical training on the playground. As a result, it rained heavily and they had to disband. A group of boys returned to the dormitory mightily. Dalu kicked open the door of the dormitory, cursing, "Sunday, this rain is heavy, like hailstones on Lao Zi's head." Zhou Jing's walked into the door with his pocket in his pocket, and after taking off his coat, he was so wet and uncomfortable. He crossed his hands and stretched the blue training uniform, and took it off, revealing 2 rows of tight and lean abdominal muscles and muscle lines on his body. It's not smooth. Sheng Nanzhou took a breath. Fuck, who can stand it? Zhou Jing's pressed his tongue against his left cheek, and said in a yellow tone, "Then, if you do it tonight, don't you know?" Sheng Nanzhou slammed a white towel on him, his voice trembled, "Smelly hooligan." After taking a shower, some boys read books and watch movies. Zhou Jing sat in a chair, and after listening to Aunt Sheng's voice, his brows wrinkled. Sheng Nanzhou handed him a can of Coke and asked, "What's wrong with my mother?" "No," she said that when she was walking around with adults these few days, she found it panicked and often demolished the house because she was dissatisfied. Zhou Jing's pulled off the tab, and the bubbles floated on the aluminum surface. "What are you dissatisfied with?" Zhou Jing's has a headache, and he wants to laugh. "What else can it be because of it? It's uncomfortable to lose it in hay. Have you been in heat?" Hay is the little female cat. Sheng Nanzhou felt strange. "It's estimated to be." Zhou Jing's took a sip of Coke, leaning back on a chair. "I will buy him a companion tomorrow." Hay is an orange cat. Zhou Jing's picked up a stray cat 2 months ago when he went out to sneak around with adults. Because Zhou Jing's was too lazy to give it a name, he fed it all day long, so he simply named it Hay. In the beginning, German Shepherd and Orange Cat fought every day, and Zhou Jing's had to separate them every time, but it didn't take long for the two to actually nest together to play with toys, and their relationship was getting better and better. But after Zhou Jing's raised the cat for more than a month, the cat ran away from home and never returned. During the period when Demya was unhappy, Zhou Jing's went out to look for it a few times. But in the vast crowd, where is it so easy to find a lost cat? Let's not talk about the dog's estrus. Brother, how did you send Sister Su back to school last time? Sheng Nanzhou winked at him. Zhou Jing said slowly, "I will ask her afterwards. Which of the 2 brothers, Sheng Yanjia and Sheng Nanzhou, is more boring?" Sheng Nanzhou hit Zhou Jing's with his shoulder and said, "I'm serious. How do I feel that Sister Su Sui is interesting to you?" A panicked face flashed in Zhou Jing's mind, and he continued, "I'm serious too, she seems to be afraid of me. Yes, I won't like you as a scumbag for me." Sheng Nanzhou shook his shoulder to imitate the heroine of a Korean drama, Siliaji. Zhou Jing snorted, too lazy to refute. The next morning there was another heavy rain. After the rain stopped almost, Zhou Jing's went out to the medical school to do something. After finishing the work, he sent a message to Hu Zixi as usual. Hu Jian went back west. Zhou Jing's? Hu Kyungzi said the whole story of Su Sui's being framed for cheating, and sighed, "I don't think she will go out recently, because I'm not in the mood. There are always 8 wives talking about her." I think Sui said nothing, but it was quite listless. The rain was very small, almost non-existent. Zhou Jing's replied, "Get it," and put the phone in his pocket. He was wearing a black peaked cap, and when he raised his eyes, he saw 2 people not far away. The not in the mood and listening of Hu Zixi's party was standing at the school gate with a boy, each holding a cup of milk tea. Zhou Jing subconsciously squinted his eyes. The girl was slender and well-behaved. The boy was wearing a white coat and was quite tall. I didn't know what to say to her. The smile on Su Suishi's white face was about to melt into the fresh cream in front of him. The boy was chatting with Su Sui with his back to the green bus stop sign. Su Sui casually looked behind him and staggered forward. Shi Yueja grabbed her elbow to keep her balance. Su Sui murmured a thank you, and withdrew her hand. Her eyes were a little flustered, and Shi Yueja followed her gaze and turned to look at it. Zhou Jing's was sticking in his pockets, walking towards them slowly. Under the black peaked cap was a cynical face. He was chewing mint with a lazy smile on his face. And Shi Yueja saw Zhou Jing's smile on his face for a moment, and when he walked to the front, it returned to normal. Why are you here? Su Sui raised his eyes and asked him. Find someone. Zhou Jing's looked down at her. Su Suqian felt that there was something wrong with the atmosphere. When he was about to break the embarrassment and introduce the two people to each other, Shi Yueja took the initiative to speak with a gentle smile. Jings, long time no see. Su Sui opened his eyes slightly, and doubts flashed in his clean pupils. You, no. Shi Yueja nodded, and when he was about to talk about the relationship between the two, Zhou Jing's pressed the tip of his tongue against the mint, biting it creaking, the powder melted in his lips and teeth. He hummed, his tone indifferent, it's not just acquaintance. What do you think is our relationship? Zhou Jing's eyes looked straight at Shi Yueja, like a hidden sharp sword. Shi Yueja was framed there. He hesitated for a long time, and finally only squeezed out two words, friend. When Zhou Jing's heard the words, the corners of his mouth slightly provoked and ridiculed, but in the end he didn't say anything. As Zhou Jing's forced to join, a strong aura lay between the two. Shi Yueja didn't know what to say. He rushed to say, you can rest assured about this, and the test results are also entered normally. Su Sui nodded. Shi Yueja hesitated before leaving, and patted him on the shoulder, smiled and said go away. Zhou Jing sneered extremely lightly, without saying anything. After Shi Yueja left, Zhou Jing's leaned against the bus stop sign. He took out the tablet candy, poured a mint candy, bowed his head and unwrapped the wrapping paper. The lower jawline was neatly curved, and he didn't say a word. Su Sui was afraid of his misunderstanding, and stammered and explained, that was my senior invigilator just now, because something happened to the exam. Out of a certain mentality, Su Sui did not tell Zhou Jing's who was the person who framed her. Brother, Zhou Jing's bit the three sons slowly, and then turned around for a long while. Has the matter been resolved? Forget it. Su Sui felt a little listless when he mentioned this. After the exam, Shi Yueja applied to go to the monitoring room and watched more than 2 hours of video playback of the exam room back and forth. After finding the real cheaters, he contacted the Academic Affairs Office and the parties involved. The matter was resolved smoothly in the end, but the student was willing to punish him instead of apologizing. For nothing, Su Sui felt a bit aggrieved by the fact that he was framed by others. But Su Sui still thanked Shi Yueja. She was not used to owing favors to others, so she could ask him any request. However, Shi Yueja refused and let her invite him to drink milk tea, so she was hit by Zhou Jing's. This scene. When Su Sui's Hung wanted to say something, the teacher sent a message to ask her to go to the office to get a copy of the test paper. Seeing her hesitant eyes, Zhou Jing's flicked her head, hurry up, I just happen to have something. After Su Sui left, Zhou Jing stood on the bus stop and smoked a cigarette. He took out his cell phone, made a call, hung up and logged into WeChat, and found Bai Yuyu's portrait. The chat records of the two still stayed last Sunday, and Bai Yuyu sent, I saw you send Su Sui back to school. Zhou Jing's never answered, and USI struck diagonally. He wiped the wet spots on the screen with his thumb, staring at the words thoughtfully. After Su Sui went to the office to help the teacher sort out the test papers, he went back to the bedroom. As soon as she opened the door, 1017 immediately ran over to meow at her. Bai Yuya was thinning her hair, and she suddenly put Mu Shu on the table with a slap. Her tone was not very pleasant, "It's so noisy." Su Sui ignored her, opened the cat food and poured it into the box to feed the cat, ignoring Bai Yuya completely. Bai Yuya fired a dumb cannon and was upset when she was about to speak. With a ding, the screen of the mobile phone on the desktop lights up. Bai Yuya picked up the mobile phone and clicked on WeChat. It was a message from Zhou Jing's, "You come out." When Bai Yuya saw this message, her eyes lit up. She immediately cleaned up the desktop and started to touch up her makeup. Her brows and eyes were joyous and happy. Bai Yuya quickly packed herself, and changed into a fleece skirt, which was beautiful and coquettish. When Bai Yuya went out, she just hit Liang Shuang, who was back. "Where are you going, dressed so beautifully?" Liang Shuang asked. "Of course, important people are looking for a date with me." As Bai Yuya said, she turned her head and glanced at Su Sui. After the orange cat had finished eating, she was opening the goat's milk and poured it into the box. She shook her hand when she heard the words, and the fresh milk was spilled on the ground. The kitten immediately lowered her head and licked it clean. After Bai Yuyu and Zhou Jing's broke up, they have been single. It is probably only Zhou Jing's who can easily arouse Bai Yuyu's mood. It turned out that in the morning Zhou Jing's had said that he was looking for Bai Yuyu, but his heart was suddenly pulled into a ball, his eyes began to panic acid, and he stared at a certain point in a daze. After Su Sufa stayed for 10 minutes, she didn't want to be in this state of malaise. She got up and packed a few books, decided to go to the library, and it was better to do something else than to think about it. When Su Sui went downstairs with a few books in her arms, a cold wind rushed in, and she shrank her shoulders unconsciously. The rain had stopped and the ground was wet. Su Sui walked through a boulevard, then down the steps, and walked to the left. The library is some distance away from the girls' dormitory, and after walking the trail, you have to go through a garden. When the weather cooled down, there were not many people in the garden. The flowers were in clusters. 2 rows of brown benches were placed opposite each other, and the armrests on them were red rust. After Su Sui walked a few steps, he heard a quarrel. She couldn't help but stop, and across a bush of wild roses, she saw 2 people who were arguing. Su Sui lowered her dark eyelashes. God really loves to tease her too much. How many times will she bump into Zhou Jing's with other girls? To be precise, it was Bai Yuya who was making the complaint unilaterally. Standing in front of Zhou Jing's, Bai Yuya was no longer the arrogant appearance in front of people. Tears fell steadily. She lowered her head. "I was wrong. Are we reconciled?" Zhou Jing's did not speak. Bai Yuya lost control of her emotions again in his silence. "Didn't I apologize to you? Are you very me when you are together? You still like me, don't you?" Bai Yuyu's voice was hollow. She seemed to find a life-saving straw, pulling apart the knitted shirt she was wearing on her upper body, extending from her collarbone to her chest. Her skin was fair and strong in vision. Bai Yuyu shook her hands to grab Zhou Jing's, and put his hands on her chest. She had no self-esteem at all. She cried and said, "Didn't you say, do you, like touching me the most?" Zhou Jing's looked at her without saying a word, but in the end he just raised his hand to help her get the clothes right, and a pair of well-knotted hands pulled the zipper back again. Su Sui caught a glimpse of his mole on the girl's shoulder. The sky was grey. Zhou Jing's was wearing a flight jacket, and his shoulders had been darkened. He listened the whole time, accepting all the good and bad accusations. He only gave one sentence and said slowly, "Bo Yuyu, don't do anything to lower the price." Bai Yuyu finally collapsed, her shoulders trembled and she couldn't cry. She finally gave up, knowing that it was impossible for her in Zhou Jing's. Bai Yuyu raised her foot and walked forward. After walking for more than 10 steps, Zhou Jing stood there, and he shouted at her, "Think about what I said." The former froze for a while, and finally left without turning his head. Zhou Jing's, wearing black pants and short boots, stood tall and handsome. He tapped his toes and sneered, "Don't listen, come out." Su Suxin was taken aback and moved 2 steps out of the book. She explained, "I didn't mean it." Zhou Jing's turned around and said slowly, "What should I do? I broke up originally, but I was seen and hurt even more. I'm sorry." Su Sui thought for a moment. Zhou Jing's put his hands in his pockets and walked towards her step by step, staring straight at Su Sui. When he came to Su Sui, the two were so close that their foreheads could touch their foreheads. The smell of smoke on his body made Su Sui flustered, and she subconsciously stepped back, but Zhou Jing's took a step closer. Zhou Jing's leaned over to look at her, eyes black as rocks, a bit frivolous and undisciplined. "Would you like to replace it?" Su Sui's ears were itchy for a while. Under Zhou Jing's gaze, her face became red with the naked eye, like a drop of red dripping onto the transparent oil paper, spreading rapidly from her cheeks to behind her ears. Subdivided in a delicate and charming taste. Seeing Su Sui not answering, Zhou Jing's took another step closer, raised his eyebrows, and asked, "Hey? I." Su Sui was both nervous and ashamed. She stepped back in succession, accidentally hitting the rose bushes and shaking. The light was hidden, something fell, and there was something crackling in the air. Combustion. Zhou Jing stood in front of her and slowly approached her. Su Sui caught a glimpse of his tall nose, his thin lips pressed down inch by inch, so close that she could see his dark eyelashes. A heart mentioned his throat, both scared and faintly expecting. As a result, Zhou Jing's leaned down and stretched out his hand to clamp the rose petals on her shoulder with his thumb and index finger, and it was actually sent into his mouth. Zhou Jing's lips pressed against the red petals, his teeth slowly chewed and nibble on it, his dark eyes showed a playful smile. "The cold has a bad spirit again." Su Sui breathed a sigh of relief, panting heavily, and at the same time the books he was holding in his arms rushed to the ground, and the petals once again shook off their shoulders. "It's teasing you." The teasing in Zhou Jing's eyes was obvious. "Come out for dinner at night, Zixi knows." Zhou Jing's plucked another petal, twisting his fingertips lightly. Su Sui nodded. After Zhou Jing's left, she was still breathing with her hands on her knees. She looked at his sloppy away back and wondered how could there be such a bad person. Like poison, just a word is addictive, falling into a dream, and falling into in the next second, making people have to wake up.